Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Thomas Kwan. On January 22, 2024, Patrick O'Hara, 70, presented to the emergency department at the Royal Victoria Infirmary in Newcastle upon Tyne with severe pain in his upper arm, particularly at the site of the vaccine injection he had received a few hours earlier. Initially, the medical staff suspected that his pain was a result of a poor injection. They provided him with antibiotics and painkillers, advised him to monitor his arm closely. However, Patrick's situation worsened. Within hours, his arm developed blisters and changed color. The following day, he returned to the hospital, where doctors were confused by the rapid decline in his condition. Blood tests were performed but did not reveal any significant issues. Eventually, it became evident that Patrick was experiencing a necrotizing infection that was damaging his tissue, particularly around the injection site. It was likely that he had not received a vaccine but rather a toxin that led to these serious complications. To contain the infection and save Patrick's life, he required surgery to remove the infected tissue. Meanwhile, specialists were working to identify the substance that had caused his condition, as knowing the specific poison involved could help doctors formulate a more effective treatment plan. Dr. Emmett, an expert in the field, suggested that iodomethane could be responsible for Patrick's condition. Iodomethane is highly toxic, and exposure can cause burns and blisters similar to those Patrick was experiencing. There had been no prior instances of methane injections in humans, making its use particularly risky, and the substance is almost impossible to detect in the body. At around 10 a.m. on the morning of January 22, while Patrick was feeling ill, a male nurse named Raj Patel from the National Health Service arrived at his home. Nurse Raj Patel was assigned to examine Patrick and arrived at his and his partner Jenny's residence. He spoke with an Asian accent and in broken English, appearing slightly awkward but competent. The visit lasted about 4 minutes, during which he collected blood and urine samples from Patrick. Jenny, Patrick's partner, came downstairs during the check and asked to have her blood pressure taken, to which Raj agreed. After that, Patrick started preparing to administer a booster vaccine. Even though he mentioned that he had already received this vaccine less than 3 months earlier, Raj insisted that he needed another dose. When Raj administered the injection, Patrick experienced sharp and intense pain. Raj assured him that this was a normal reaction and that the pain would soon subside. However, after giving the injection, Raj quickly gathered his equipment and left the house, which Patrick found suspicious. At the hospital, where Patrick was placed in intensive care, the doctors noticed several letters that he and Jenny had received recently. They informed Jenny that there was no local nursing staff and that the National Health Service had no nurse named Raj Patel. This letter turned out to be a forgery, and the health worker was a fraud. The forgery was well crafted. It featured the National Health Service logo at the top, included hyperlinks, and used medical language along with personal privacy notes typical of unofficial reports. Another letter, sent earlier that month, followed a similar format. It included a QR code that directed Patrick to a short health questionnaire and suggested a home visit on January 22 between 9 a.m. and 1 p.m. The day before this, Patrick received a reminder text message from an unknown number, claiming to be from a health worker named Patel. However, Patrick only became suspicious when Nurse Raj began to act nervously during the injection. One particular action raised alarms. As Raj was leaving, Jenny came down the stairs and told him he was as tall as her son. This startled Patrick, and she chased after him, but he disappeared. Northumbria police then began tracking him from his home in Newcastle city centre. CCTV footage showed him driving to a hotel and checking in. Raj arrived in a car with fake number plates. He checked into the hotel using a false name. 2 hours later, he left his room wearing a long coat, a flat cap, blue surgical gloves, and a medical mask. He walked through the hotel lobby and exited the building. It was less than a 10-minute walk from the hotel to Patrick and Jenny's home on St. Thomas's Street. In the UK, number plates are specific to the make and model of the vehicle they are assigned to. The number plates on Raj's vehicle were easily identifiable as counterfeit. They matched the car's make but not its model. Investigators traced the car back to the hotel that morning and then to its original location, which led them to the small town of Ingleby Barwick, south of Newcastle in Stockton. The car had left the home of Thomas Kwan, son of Jenny Leung. Jenny has several sons from her first marriage, but she noticed a resemblance between her eldest son, Thomas Kwan, 50, and Raj Patel. Thomas was born in Hong Kong and moved to the UK 39 years ago at the age of 13. His parents sent him to an English boarding school, and he later studied medicine at Newcastle University. He is now a general practitioner and a partner at Happy House Clinic in Sunderland, about a half-hour's drive from his mother's home. Thomas had a troubled relationship with his mother, likely stemming from their parents' divorce that occurred 27 years ago. Many of Thomas's issues with her revolved around money. He believed that before their separation, his mother, Jenny, had taken £1 million from their joint account and pressured his father into the divorce. Years later, when his father passed away, Thomas was upset to find that he received a smaller portion of the inheritance compared to his younger brother. In a letter to his mother, Thomas expressed his feelings, accusing her of being unfair and of stealing money from his father. He asked her to clarify the changes in the will and accused her of betrayal. Patrick, trying to ease the tension, asked Thomas to leave the house and confronted him emotionally. Jenny's actions further complicated the family dynamics. The police were called to the scene, but Thomas left before they arrived. This incident deeply affected the relationship between him and his mother, Jenny. Since then, Thomas has had little contact with her and has not visited. When authorities began investigating the case of the fake nurse, they discovered that Thomas's name appeared in their review of the nurse's route. CCTV footage showed the car traveling from Newcastle to Ingleby Barwick, heading directly to Thomas's house. This connection raised suspicions among investigators, who found it odd that a vehicle linked to the crime was seen near Thomas's residence. They quickly sought more information about him. It was revealed that there had been a conflict over a will, which could have provided a motive for his involvement. Investigators also discovered that Thomas had previously purchased chemicals, including toxic substances, which could have been used to create the agent that made Patrick sick. These online purchases became a significant focus of the investigation. The police then searched Thomas's home and found packages of chemical reagents and equipment in his garage that resembled a laboratory. They also discovered medical supplies, including syringes, gloves, and protective masks. On Thomas's computer, investigators found searches relating to toxic substances and how to use them. Additionally, there were fake National Health Service forms that matched those sent to Patrick and Jenny. Further investigation revealed that Thomas had planned the crime well in advance, using his medical expertise and available resources. He fabricated an elaborate story to pose as a fake nurse, knowing exactly how to speak, present himself, and what documents to provide. However, his rushed escape after administering the injection, along with other blunders, ultimately worked against him. The police arrested Thomas on February 15, 2024. At the time of his arrest, he denied any involvement in Patrick's poisoning, but the evidence against him grew increasingly compelling. The case was classified as attempted murder, and preparations were made for it to go to court. Thomas leveraged his medical reputation and knowledge to create a false appearance of professionalism. He orchestrated the entire scheme to avoid detection until it was too late. During a search of his home, police discovered not only chemicals and instructions but also complete production equipment, including measuring instruments, protective suits, and laboratory containers. The investigation revealed that Thomas had been planning his crime for an extended period, gathering resources and researching their characteristics. His mobile phone contained clear evidence of his intentions, showing multiple internet searches for poisons. He specifically looked for information on how to use ricin to carry out a slow and painful murder. His searches included terms like ricin dosage, duration of the toxin, and cyanide effects on the human body, indicating that he aimed to proceed carefully and minimize errors. Despite his planning, Thomas made several mistakes that led to the investigation uncovering his scheme. For example, he used a fake license plate on his car, but the police quickly noticed that the plates didn't match the car model. Additionally, his disguise as a nurse was inadequate. Jenny's comment that he resembled her son raised initial suspicions. His quick departure from home after administering the injection and his suspicious behavior further contributed to the doubts about him. Books on toxicology and instructions for creating poisons found in Thomas's possession strengthened the case against him. Additionally, a copy of the National Center of Excellence for Police Investigation Manual on Murder was discovered on his computer. This manual could provide a criminal with insights on how to avoid detection. The evidence suggested that Thomas planned to commit the murder with great precision while minimizing the risk of being caught. What was particularly alarming was how he manipulated his family. The letters, text messages, and Thomas's fabricated identity as a nurse indicated that he was orchestrating a large-scale scheme. It was shocking to think that a doctor, someone who was supposed to save lives, was involved in such a heinous crime. When arrested, Thomas denied all accusations. However, the evidence gathered, including chemicals, laboratory equipment, books, and digital records, painted an undeniable picture of his guilt. The investigation revealed that he acted with cold calculation, leveraging his expertise and resources to commit a deliberate poisoning with the intent to kill. He refused to admit guilt regarding attempted murder, but the evidence, including his internet searches, was compelling. The police also found that Thomas had been spying on his mother and her partner, Patrick. He had installed spyware on a laptop they gave him, which allowed him to monitor their daily activities, read emails, and track financial transactions in real time, taking screenshots and saving correspondence to support his suspicions of misuse of the family's money. What was especially shocking was that Thomas devised multiple plans for the murder before finally deciding to impersonate a nurse. One of his ideas involved sending poisoned drinks or food while pretending to be part of a made-up group called the Northern Wine Tasting Club, offering free samples. These plans revealed just how far he was willing to go to achieve his goal. When Thomas created the nurse persona, Raj Patel, he made a fake ID with his own picture, used a wig, and glued on a beard. He not only had a detailed cover story but also props to support his disguise in case anyone questioned him. During the 40 minutes he spent in the house, he managed to deceive even his own mother by acting like a caring healthcare worker. This revelation stunned those who knew Thomas. Patients were shocked to find out that their doctor was involved in such a crime. Many expressed that the trust typically inspired by a man in a doctor's uniform was ruthlessly exploited. Residents in the neighborhood watched in horror as the investigation disrupted their quiet suburb. While Patrick was in intensive care, doctors worked hard to save his life. He underwent several surgeries to remove dead tissue and stop the infection from spreading further. Additionally, he needed plastic surgery to repair the damage to his arm. Fortunately, Patrick survived, but he faces a long road to full recovery. Thomas Kwan was arrested but refused to cooperate with the medical team trying to determine what substance was injected into Patrick. By staying silent, he raised suspicions that he deliberately aimed to cause serious harm. The investigation indicated that he probably used iodine. During the proceedings, Thomas asserted that he did not intend to kill anyone, he merely sought to inflict mild pain or discomfort. However, when his trial commenced in Newcastle in October 2024, this assertion quickly fell apart in light of the evidence presented. Prosecutor Peter Makepeace, in his opening statement, reminded the jury that sometimes reality can be stranger than fiction. He pointed out that Thomas's careful and detailed planning suggested that his intentions were far more serious than he claimed. Thomas's knowledge of poisons, his extensive research, and his experience made it clear that he fully understood the life-threatening nature of his actions. Moreover, Thomas's motivation went beyond mere financial gain. Even though the inheritance he received after dividing property with his relatives was relatively small, his feelings of grievance ran deeper. He accused his mother of not loving him enough during his childhood and framed the attack on Patrick, her partner, as a means to emotionally hurt her in revenge. On the second day of the trial, October 7, 2024, Thomas pleaded guilty, which spared the court from weeks of hearings. The victim, Patrick O'Hara, shared how the attack affected his life. Thomas received a severe sentence that reflected both the seriousness of his crime and the level of planning involved. The judge noted that while some aspects of Thomas's plan were poorly executed, such as using fake license plates that didn't match the car model, he had put a significant amount of effort into preparing for the crime. This level of planning justified a lengthy sentence. Thomas Kwan was sentenced to 31 years and 5 months in prison. His guilty plea and clean record prior to the incident were taken into consideration during sentencing. Patrick O'Hara faced challenges in his recovery, suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, which ultimately led to the end of his long-term relationship with Jenny. Despite these difficulties, Patrick expressed his appreciation for the professionals at the National Health Service who saved his life. After the trial, he gradually returned to a normal routine, though he continued to experience physical and emotional reminders of the attack. Nonetheless, this incident became a catalyst for new beginnings for him. After parting ways with Jenny, he relocated from Newcastle to a quiet coastal town where he found peace. While there, Patrick focused on helping victims of violence and fraud. He began speaking at conferences and in the media to share his story and emphasize the importance of remaining vigilant, even in everyday situations. Meanwhile, Jenny, overwhelmed by her son's actions and her guilt toward Patrick, worked on improving her family relationships. She stepped back from public life to concentrate on her family, but her bond with Thomas was never repaired. In prison, Thomas Kwan began to understand the seriousness of his actions. In isolation, he had to confront his motives and the harm he had caused to his family. However, prison records indicated that he still had a long way to go before he felt true remorse. At the beginning of his sentence, he continued to rationalize his actions, feeling a sense of injustice. Patrick, who had endured many hardships, found happiness in simple pleasures, like walks by the sea and friendships with those who valued him for who he was. He often expressed that his greatest achievement was learning to trust again. Although the scars on his hand never disappeared, he came to see them not as reminders of pain, but as symbols of the strength he discovered to keep moving forward, even in the toughest times. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Emma Jangestig. Arboga, a small town in Sweden about 160 kilometers west of Stockholm, experienced a crime in 2008 that remains one of the most shocking in the country. On March 17, 2008, a 20-year-old mother of two, Emma Jangestig, was spending the evening with her children. Her eldest, Max, was 3 years old, and her youngest, Saga, was 1.5. Emma was preparing dinner while waiting for her fiancé, Torg Hellberg, who was still at work and expected to return in a few hours. Emma had been divorced for a year when she met Torg. They quickly developed a relationship and moved in together. The couple bought a house. This move took place just 2 months before the tragedy. Although Torg was not the biological father of Emma's children, he cared for them as if they were his own. It seemed that Emma had found the perfect partner to build a complete family and raise her children. Nicholas, the biological father of Max and Saga, maintained contact with the kids. He had a reserved relationship with his ex-wife, Emma, but spoke with the children almost every day. Around 6 p.m., Emma and the children sat down for dinner. Torg couldn't join them this time because he was working late, but he said he would be home soon. While waiting, Emma decided to use the time to message her family and friends. She used a messaging app to chat with her sister, and their conversation continued smoothly until her sister received the last message at 19:07. Suddenly, their dialogue stopped abruptly in the middle of a sentence. Emma didn't read more messages or respond, which seemed odd. Her sister found this strange, so she contacted Torg and expressed her concern about Emma's unusual behavior and lack of response. As it turned out, Torg was free earlier than expected and was already walking home. He assured Emma's sister that he would check on the situation. Torg arrived at the house at 19:17. Everything seemed normal from the outside. But he noticed the front door was open, which was unusual since it was usually locked. Sensing something was wrong, Tord cautiously entered the house and was met with a shocking sight. The corridor was in complete disarray, items were scattered on the floor, and some pieces of furniture were broken. Initially, he couldn't understand what had happened and thought it might be a children's game that had gotten out of hand. However, he soon realized that the extent of the chaos was too severe for children to have caused it, and Emma would not have allowed it. He called out to all the household members by name several times, but there was no response. Suddenly, at the end of the hallway, Tord noticed a suspicious figure on the floor. As he approached, he was horrified. He saw a small body lying in an unusual position with many cuts on its face and head. Emma lay next to it, her body covered in blood. Realizing he needed to act quickly, Tord called the police at 7:20 p.m. The police received the call from Tord, a distressed man who was desperately calling for help. He explained that someone had attacked his family while he was away. In the background, a woman's moans could be heard. The police quickly dispatched police and ambulance services to the location. Doctors arrived within minutes. By then, Tord had discovered that all 3 family members had suffered severe head injuries, so severe that they were unrecognizable. To their surprise, doctors discovered that all of the victims were still alive and breathing. Everyone was immediately taken to the hospital for emergency care. Max and Saga were in critical condition, while Emma's injuries were slightly less severe. Her was placed in intensive care and put into a medically induced coma. Doctors predicted from the start that even if the children and mother survived, the brain injuries they suffered would likely have long-term effects on their lives. Doctors battled to save the victims. Meanwhile, forensic experts examined the scene of the horrific attack, which looked like a scene from a horror movie. The area was cordoned off for a thorough examination due to the severe chaos inside the house. Unfortunately, the medical team left many traces while providing aid and transporting the victims, which led to displaced objects and lost evidence. The attack clearly happened within a 13-minute window between 1907, when Emma's sister received her last message, and Tord's emergency call at 1920. Initially, Tord, the head of the family, was suspected. However, he had a solid alibi as surveillance cameras had captured him on his way home, thus eliminating him from the suspect list. With the time intervals clarified, it became clear that he was telling the truth. This indicated that the attacker had only a 10-minute window between 1907 and 1917, when Tord entered the house and found the wounded family members. Although Tord was no longer a suspect, the police decided to speak with him again at the station. They assumed he might have seen or heard something important for the investigation. However, he insisted that he did not see any strangers or cars. The only thing that seemed suspicious to him was the unlocked door of the house. Police then suspected Emma's ex-husband Nicholas as a potential suspect. Tord explained that Nicholas had constant conflicts with Emma over communication about the children, division of assets and alimony. These issues escalated at times, and she even went to the police because she feared for her safety. However, this was long before the tragedy. Eventually, they reached an agreement and everything was resolved. The police are working hard at the crime scene to gather more information. The perpetrator could be someone close to Emma. Looking at the level of attacks on the victims, it seems that there was a personal motive. Whoever this person was, they harbored a deep hatred for the victims, lost control during the killing process, and caused many injuries. At the time, Emma's ex-husband Nicholas was the prime suspect. Due to previous conflicts with Emma, he even threatened her, prompting her to contact the police. He was later arrested and questioned. Nicholas was shocked by the incident but calmly answered police questions. He had an alibi for the time of the attack, as he was in another city. Although the alibi has not been verified, his behavior suggests that he is not the killer. The police's only hope is 3-year-old Saga, who is still fighting for her life in hospital. If she survives, she could be the police's only witness, providing vital information about who the killer is. The victim's family fear the attacker may return to harm Saga again. To protect her, 24-hour security has been deployed to the hospital. She is in critical condition and doctors believe that even if she survives, she may be permanently disabled and might not remember the attack. No other witnesses to the attack could be found. The neighbors neither saw nor heard anything, so the police started reviewing the surveillance cameras in the area. They hoped to track the attacker and determine his origin. It was also crucial to find the murder weapon, which might have traces of the criminal. Therefore, patrol officers carefully examined the area and even used search dogs, but unfortunately, this yielded no results. Forensic experts found that the children had been attacked with a heavy object, such as a hammer or similar tool. The children had been hit with such force that their skulls had been fractured. Each child had been hit multiple times, indicating the intensity of the attacker's rage. This behavior was an important clue. However, it is not possible to identify anyone capable of doing so. The young family had no connections to the criminal world and no enemies. They were known to be good people. The police quickly confirmed their suspicions of a personal motive, as nothing was stolen from the crime scene. Valuables and money were still present, indicating it wasn't a robbery. The forensic examination of the house concluded the day after the murder. By then, Nicholas was removed from the list of suspects because his alibi was verified. And he was released. Emma is still in a coma and the investigation is making no progress. The case attracted considerable media attention. The area had a low crime rate, and the choice of victims and the level of cruelty were shocking. Police contacted local people through the media, which aroused the interest of those living near Emma's house. A passerby reported seeing a man dressed in black with a hood standing hesitantly in the doorway of the house at around 7 p.m. About 5 to 10 minutes later, the same witness, returning from the shop, saw a suspiciously frail man dressed in black run out of the house, get into a car and drive away immediately. He did not get a good look at the person and could not describe the car, but he thought the driver might be a woman disguised as a man. Several other witnesses later gave similar descriptions of a man in the area. It was clear that the man dressed in black was the suspect before the attack. A man then went to the police and reported his ex-girlfriend, expressing concern about her recent inappropriate behavior. She was identified as Christina Scherer, 31, born in Hanover, Germany. When she was 11, her father left the family and they had limited contact after that. Christina then moved to New York and lived with relatives in Manhattan. After returning to Germany, Christina settled in Göttingen, where for the next 6 years she studied history. She then went to Greece and participated in RASP. While in Athens, she worked at a hotel and as a historian. Later, she moved to Crete and worked in another hotel. In August 2006, Torg, a 20-year-old trader, vacationed on Crete and stayed at Christina's hotel. On his first day there, he met Christina, and they began a romance. They spent 5 days together on his vacation and continued to correspond after he left. Christina later visited him in Sweden, where they spent several days together. After her visit, she suggested going skiing, but he was not interested. Torg admitted that during this time, he noticed that Christina seemed very different than when she was on vacation, and he felt suspicious about their relationship. In January, he told Christina that their relationship was over, but she couldn't accept it calmly and tried everything to fix it. She kept messaging him, urging him to reconsider and get back together. In March 2007, she visited Sweden for 2 weeks and convinced Torg to have dinner with her. He agreed, but during the meeting, he made it clear that they could only be friends. Christina accepted this and left, but after some time, she returned to Sweden again, insisting on a new meeting, considering that this should be the last dinner together at which they would clear things up. During this meeting, she suggested giving their relationship another chance, but Tord firmly refused, as he believed the matter was settled. The Christina informed the Tord that, since they would no longer be in a relationship, she wanted to visit him to collect some items she forgot during a previous visit. Tord agreed to her request. After a brief visit, Christina left. However, the next day, she called again asking for help because she got lost near a castle. The Tord went to find her, and when he did, she admitted that she had taken a large dose of drugs the previous night, intending to end her life due to their breakup. Feeling compassionate, Tord allowed her to stay the night. He contacted her family in Germany to express concern over Christina's situation, informing them about her mental health issues and suggesting they admit her to a psychiatric hospital. Tord was confident that she needed help and hoped treatment would resolve her obsessive behavior. Additionally, he felt she would be far enough away not to disturb him anymore. Her family arranged for her to stay in a psychiatric clinic for 3 weeks. Unfortunately, even this did not stop her. In the summer of 2007, she moved to Stockholm with the intention of staying long-term. Christina rented a house and began looking for work. It was later discovered that in January 2008, she went to Germany but returned on February 20th. After her return, she wrote to Tord, saying that she had given birth to his son. Christina also revealed that she had given the child up for adoption due to her mental health problems. This caused confusion for Tord, as he did not know about her pregnancy. Christina mentioned that she had just gone on a business trip to Germany and that their child might have a genetic blood disease. She said that if the doctor's answer was confirmed, the adoptive parents would contact Tord to discuss the matter. Tord was confused by this. At the time, he was in a serious relationship with Emma and they lived together with her children. In January 2008, they moved into a new house. Emma knew about Christina's problems and the story of her son. Emma was skeptical and asked in question, which hospital was the child born in? She wanted to verify this information to avoid any problems, but Christina could not answer. It seemed that she was lying. After some time, Tord received the call from a stranger claiming to be the adoptive father of Christina's son. He confirmed what Christina had said and confirmed that Tord was the biological father of the child. The entire situation seemed unbelievable. It appeared that someone Christina knew had contacted Tord at her request, trying to manipulate the situation. At this point, Tord and Emma both believed the story of the child to be a fabrication. Christina could not provide any evidence of her son's existence. Police began investigating the possibility that Christina had been involved in the murder of Emma and her 2 children. She had been near Emma's home on the day of the murder before quickly leaving for Germany. To solve these problems, cooperation between the Swedish and German police was needed. On March 20th, a warrant was issued for Christina's arrest. The media quickly reported that Christina had been found in Hanover. Upon hearing the news, her mother and brother contacted the police, asking why Christina was a suspect. The police explained their suspicions of her involvement in a violent attack, which shocked her mother. Christina then called the police herself, claiming it was a misunderstanding and denying any involvement. However, she was arrested after speaking with the police. Christina requested an attorney, and her attorney found an error in the arrest warrant, which led to her release. However, Christina was rearrested 24 hours later. Throughout her interrogation, Christina maintained her innocence. When police searched her rented apartment, they confiscated her cell phone, laptop, and the clothing she was believed to have been wearing on the day of the murder. Christina claimed she was wearing a beige jacket, but witnesses said they saw her wearing a black jacket. The black jacket found during the search was clean and bloodless, suggesting it may have been a different item of clothing. The key evidence was found in search queries on Christina's laptop, which had many photos of Emma and her children and a blueprint of their home. This showed that Christina was planning the crime. Just before the attack, she looked up ways to hide evidence of a crime. She also repeatedly checked Tord's social media pages, demonstrating her intense obsession with him, along with diary entries detailing her victims, including their addresses and habits. On March 27, Emma emerged from her coma. She was recognizable, much to the relief of her family. Police prepared for a crucial interview when Emma was able to communicate clearly, taking care not to mention her children to protect her mental state and ensure accurate responses. On April 1, just 3 days after waking from her coma, Emma had her first meeting with the police. Despite her efforts to remember, she did not understand the police's questions or why she was in the hospital. Doctors hoped that her memory would improve over time. Emma asked more and more about her children. After her first interview, a doctor briefed her about the attack but did not go into detail. However, by the next morning, Emma had forgotten the conversation, a situation that lasted for weeks. Because of her fragile condition, officials chose to provide only vague answers about her children and prevented her from accessing newspapers or TV. This restriction frustrated her further, as she couldn't understand the situation. She continued to believe her children were alive, despite her initial memory lapses. Finally, after a conversation with a doctor, she realized that she would never see her children again, but she still could not remember what had happened. She believed that she had been in a serious accident. At this time, forensic experts did not find any of Christina's DNA or fingerprints in Emma's house. It is possible that Christina's attempt to stage the murder was successful. Additionally, they were unable to find a murder weapon. In March, Christina's roommate reported to the police that a hammer had gone missing from her toolbox. The hammer matched the description of the murder weapon, indirectly linking Christina to the crime. However, without strong evidence to charge, the investigation continued. Police focused on shoe prints found at the scene of the children's murders. Several other footprints, belonging to the paramedics, the 3 victims, and Tord, were not involved and were discarded. However, police did identify prints from sneakers not worn by family members or police. They identified the brand, style, and size that Christina had worn. A photo on her personal page showed her wearing the same pair of sneakers, in the same size, but this evidence remained circumstantial. Video surveillance recordings from the railway station provided significant evidence, showing that Christina, wearing her jacket, visited the city at least 3 times in the week before the attack. Her last visit was on the day of the murder, March 17. Although the images were unclear, her identity was confirmed through mobile phone geolocation. When questioned, Christina could not clearly explain her presence in the city. She later stated that she was there for work. Police were able to determine the motive for the attack when they found notes on Christina's computer that revealed her intense jealousy of Emma, as Christina struggled to accept that Tord had found happiness with someone else. A psychological examination determined that Christina was sane. The police continued to make every effort to help the Emma, who miraculously survived, regain her memory. They even accompanied her to the crime scene, but this did not assist. Then, a few days later, there was an unexpected breakthrough. Emma suddenly recalled that on the evening of March 17, someone had knocked on the door. The Emma opened it to find a girl in dark clothes and a hood standing there. The stranger introduced herself as Christina and immediately struck Emma on the head with a heavy object. It is frightening to think about what happened next in the house and what the defenseless children went through. On July 29, 2008, Christina Scherer appeared in court in Sweden, charged with double murder and attempted murder. Her defense team remained hopeful, considering the evidence against her circumstantial and easily dismissed. However, Christina's strange behavior complicated matters. She waved and smiled inappropriately at those present in court, behavior that supported the prosecutor's portrayal of her as cruel. Christina said her visit to the city was for work. The prosecution, on the other hand, argued that she had come to the city with the intention of killing. They claimed that she had been there twice before, on March 12 and 14, to check out her targets. Furthermore, they portrayed Christina as a pathological liar obsessed with her ex-partner. There was no evidence that she had ever been pregnant or had children. No witnesses saw her pregnant, and there were no maternity records showing that she had given birth or adopted a child. This undermined her claim of having children, casting doubt on her credibility. The key witness for the prosecution was Emma, who identified Christina on the first day of the hearing. She recalled that about 10 minutes before returning from work, she opened the door and encountered the person who had killed her children. Emma was so shocked to see the killer that she fainted in the courtroom. This incident was significant because it confirmed that Emma had not been exposed to any information about the suspect or the crime prior to that moment, which strengthened the prosecution's case. The defense focused on the fact that all the evidence against Christina was circumstantial. They pointed out that the murder weapon didn't have her fingerprints, and there was no DNA evidence linking her to the crime. The prosecutors highlighted blurry surveillance footage and a sneaker print, suggesting that doctors may have inadvertently destroyed important evidence. Additionally, one witness recalled seeing Christina near the crime scene, which supported her presence close to Emma's house, where another witness identified the attacker. Christina could not explain her internet searches in relation to the evidence cover-up, nor why she had photos of Emma and the children, along with a diagram of Emma's house. On August 26, the jury found Christina Schurer guilty of double murder and attempted murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without parole. In addition, the court ordered her to pay Emma 100,000 crowns, or about $10,000. Christina's attorney immediately appealed the decision, but the appeal was denied. It is expected that if Christina is ever released from prison, she will be deported to Germany and permanently barred from returning to Sweden. In 2012, she was transferred to a women's prison in Fay, Germany, at her request. She continues to seek to overturn the court's decision and insists on her innocence, attempting to obtain a new trial. Emma is still dealing with the physical and mental effects of her injuries. Throughout this time, Torg has been a strong support, and they eventually married. They later had 2 children together. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Assunta Botera. Rosario Porto and her husband, Alfonso Botera, were wealthy individuals. Rosario's father served as an influential French consul, and her mother was an art teacher. Rosario followed in his father's footsteps. She became a successful lawyer. In 1997, she was appointed French consul. She inherited this post from her father. Alfonso was a well-known journalist. He and Rosario married in 1996 and they moved to a large apartment in an upscale area of Santiago de Compostela, Spain. Rosario had lupus erythematosus, which led doctors to advise against pregnancy. They decided to adopt a child abandoned by his parents and create a loving home for him. Adoption was challenging in Spain, so when they were in their early 30s, they chose to go to China for adoption. After navigating numerous bureaucratic hurdles, they arrived at an orphanage. Rosario immediately noticed a 9-month-old girl, and within 2 weeks, they resolved all issues to officially adopt her. When returning to Spain, the child's documents named her Assunta Fon Yan. This was notable since Assunta was among the first Chinese children adopted in the area. Initially, it seemed fortunate for her to join a respected and wealthy family, but unfortunately, this joy did not last long. Assunta was a highly capable girl. She excelled academically, studied multiple languages, practiced ballet, and attended music school. It seems that Rosario and Alfonso want to give her every opportunity to develop. On July 4, 2013, Rosario and her 12-year-old daughter, Assunta, went to the beach to cool off on a hot day. Assunta told a terrifying story about a man wearing a black mask and gloves who tried to strangle her the night before. The longer the girl talked, the more she lost control, and finally, her mother cried. She knew about it, she was there when it happened, but for some reason she did not contact the police. On the night of September 21, 2013, at 10:30 p.m., Rosario and Alfonso were at the police station for another reason. They reported their daughter, Assunta, was missing for several hours. Then, Rosario recounted Assunta's story of the attempted attack from 2.5 months prior. This left them fearful that the attacker had returned and something terrible might have happened to their daughter. They were terrified she had been kidnapped. Alfonso was convinced she was no longer alive. They urgently pleaded with the police to take immediate action. In the early hours of September 22, two men were driving through a forest on their way back from a bar. Suddenly, the driver stopped, saying he noticed something unusual in the forest. He didn't understand what was going on, so he turned his headlights toward the forest and mentioned to his friend that he felt like someone was watching them. Despite this, he wasn't scared, likely due to the alcohol he had consumed, so he got out of the car and walked a few steps into the forest. In the light of the car's headlights, he saw something on the ground that looked like a doll. As he approached, he realized it was a girl. She was tied up, and her clothes were dirty. He checked for a pulse and found that the girl was dead. Then, they quickly contacted the police. The police identified the body as Assunta, who had died just a week before her 13th birthday. While examining the area near her body, they discovered her mobile phone, which contained some disturbing photographs. There are several photos of she wrapped tightly, lying with her eyes wide open. Some forensic experts suggested her dilated pupils indicated possible drug use. Even more distressing were photos of the girl in revealing clothing, with bright makeup, fishnet stockings, and posing provocatively on a couch. Her eyes remained wide open, and her pupils were dilated. These photos later appeared on the internet, were widely circulated and making people angry about how a child was treated like that. Assunta's last day was described by her parents as ordinary. However, then little girl suddenly went missing and was found dead a few hours after they reported her disappearance. On that day, the girl went to visit her father, Alfonso, at his work, and then hurried back home, so she not wanting to miss The Simpsons at about 7 p.m. After she returned home, Rosario, her mother, came back from work and saw her daughter in her room, where she had her books spread out on the floor for homework. Rosario didn't notice anything unusual and left to go to their country house, which was about half an hour away, to pick up bathing suits and other items for a planned beach outing the next day. Rosario returned around 9:30 p.m., and by then, Assunta was no longer in the apartment. Rosario became worried because little girl hadn't called or mentioned any plans to go out, which was unusual for her. Thinking maybe she had gone to see friends, Rosario started calling the girl's friends and Alfonso, but nobody had seen she. Rosario was the last person to see Assunta alive, making her one of the first individuals the detectives focused on, and she was questioned at the station. During her discussion with the police, Rosario recalled the incidents of July 4th, the night of the first attack. When they returned from the store that evening, Assunta closed the front door but left the key in the lock. Her mother didn't notice, and they went to bed. Around 3 a.m., Rosario was awakened by cries for help. Rosario rushed to her daughter's room and saw a large man pinning little girl to the floor, seemingly trying to strangle her. She attacked the intruder, but he was very strong and easily threw her against the wall. Fortunately, no one was harmed, and the attacker fled. Rosario described him as a strong, middle-aged man dressed in black, wearing a mask and gloves, so it is not possible to give a more detailed description. Assunta told her friend about what happened and even sent several photos showing red marks on her neck. Assunta's father, Alfonso, mentioned that little girl had struggled with depression for a long time and was taking medication prescribed by doctors. This was confirmed because Assunta talked to friends and shared her experiences. Recently, she had been speaking more positively about her situation, saying she felt much better. However, after Assunta was first attacked, Rosario did not investigate to find out what was happening to her daughter. She cited Assunta's fragile emotional state and said she feared contacting police would upset Assunta. This explanation was not very convincing. Over the years, Assunta had been admitted to a psychiatric hospital because she often expressed end-her-life thoughts. Besides, she is very tired because of the overload of knowledge at school and extra classes. The nanny also said that Rosario had recently become very frustrated with Assunta, as little girl was no longer meeting Rosario's expectations, and her academic performance had declined. She had become somewhat of a burden, prompting Rosario to consider sending her to study in Poland. However, Rosario did not mention this to the detectives, so they decided to investigate Rosario's immediately. They were particularly interested in the country house Rosario visited on the day Assunta disappeared. As it turned out, when detectives got there, they found Assunta's body lying just 4 kilometers away. Rosario appeared surprised to see them. She was furious. She quickly headed to the second floor, clearly trying to hide something. When a detective checked a nearby trash can, he found a piece of orange rope inside, identical to the one used to tie Assunta's hands and feet. There was also a black mask and gloves. All these items were collected for examination, but unfortunately, no fingerprints or DNA were found. The investigative committee conducted several autopsies. They did not measure the body temperature immediately, fearing it might compromise the evidence, so the exact time of death couldn't be determined. However, it was estimated that Assunta was killed around 8 p.m. The cause of death was suffocation. Her mouth and nose were covered with a soft object, likely a pillow, which prevented her from breathing, leading to unconsciousness and eventually death. In addition, an autopsy determined that Assunta had taken at least 27 lorazepam pills on the day of her death, 9 times the normal amount for an adult. Hair tests revealed this was not the first occurrence. Little girl had overdoses 3 months before her death, starting when the attacker first breaks into the home. It's important to note that overdoses of this drug can cause amnesia and loss of muscle control. The drug was used to treat anxiety disorders and insomnia. The police discovered that Rosario used it to combat depression, but it was not prescribed for Assunta. No one could explain why Assunta took the drug. According to Rosario, the criminals gave Assunta medicine so she wouldn't remember the incident. Detectives conducted a review of CCTV footage in the area to track Assunta's movements that day. Around 2 p.m., she visited her father, Alfonso. At 5:21 p.m., she returned home, and at 5:28 p.m., Rosario returned home. At 6:20 p.m., a gas station camera recorded a green Mercedes belonging to Rosario. She admitted the car was moving towards a house in the country. It was clear that besides the driver, there was a girl in the car, identified as Assunta. They were heading in the direction where Assunta's body was later found. The new testimony completely contradicted Rosario's earlier statements, making she the primary suspect in the murder. Therefore, she was questioned again. Rosario's face showed fear and shame because she had let her adopted daughter go missing while she was responsible for taking care of the girl. Then, she offered a different version of events. According to her, they went out to get swimsuits together, but when they arrived at the country house, Assunta refused to enter with her. Assunta chose to stay in the car while Rosario took everything she needed and did some small work. However, this took longer than expected, and Assunta wanted to return home to do chores and rest. Rosario agreed and drove her daughter back. But she dropped her daughter off about a 20-minute walk from their apartment to avoid navigating the narrow streets. However, the police reviewed CCTV footage from the outskirts of Santiago but found no evidence of Rosario taking her daughter back home. They only saw footage of Rosario leaving her country house alone around 9 p.m. Her story is full of controversial and contradictory details. She appeared to look at the detectives with arrogance, displaying coldness and showing no regret over the loss of her child. She persistently insisted that the large man in black was involved in the incident. When the police interviewed the Botera family's neighbors, one mentioned hearing screams at night in July, when Assunta was first attacked. He also observed something unusual. Even though the attacker entered an area where dogs lived, the dogs were silent, indicating that the attacker was very familiar with them. All in all, everything seemed suspicious, making them even more suspicious that Rosario and Alfonso were involved in the murder of their adopted daughter. The police considered different theories about the first home invasion. Some thought it was fabricated by Rosario, while others suspected it was the parents' first attempt at murder. Few believed an outsider was involved. On September 24th, Rosario and Alfonso held a funeral, during which they behaved oddly, even taking a selfie in front of the coffin. Due to inconsistencies in her testimony, Rosario was arrested after the funeral. By then, detectives had discovered what might have been the motive behind the crime. Witnesses came forward with information about incident from 9 months prior to the tragedy, and this may have been the beginning of the bloody end. In January 2013, Rosario started a relationship with a realtor named Manuel Garcia, whom she hired to sell real estate. Manuel was married and made it clear he would not leave his family. He considers the relationship with Rosario to be nothing more than an affair. Rosario was fine with this, and their secret relationship continued. During this time, her relationship with her husband, Alfonso, quickly deteriorated. She finds Alfonso boring and considers him a failure who overestimates himself. She described him as insensitive, while her lover, Manuel, was the complete opposite. After Alfonso finds messages from Rosario's lover on his wife's phone, they divorced in February 2013. Rosario and her daughter Assunta continued living in the apartment. She maintained her business and visited a country house. Custody of the daughter, Assunta, was shared, and both parents have the right to see the little girl. After Assunta's parents divorced, she lived in both her father's and her mother's houses. Many observed that she was always close to her mother, while her relationship with her father was not as warm. However, her father made efforts to improve their relationship. He also repeatedly told his ex-wife Rosario that they would be forever tied together through their adopted daughter. Is it possible that because Rosario wants to completely cut off contact with her ex-husband, so she will cause the innocent child to leave forever? It is known that earlier in the summer, Rosario had to end her relationship with her lover, Manuel. Alfonso took advantage of the opportunity, he convincing Rosario to end her relationship with Manuel in exchange for his help with their daughter while she was in the hospital. And Rosario agreed to this request. However, it was revealed that on September 21st, Rosario broke her promise, she spending most of the day with Manuel and only returning home in the evening. This is very suspicious, because soon after, Assunta was killed. During the investigation, numerous assumptions were made, including one significant point emphasized by the defense. They argued that male DNA was found on the clothes Assunta's, indicating a man's involvement. While it was considered possible that the mother was not involved in the crime, this scenario was deemed unlikely. Police have stepped up their investigation, collecting documents for analysis, focusing on identifying male DNA on Assunta's body. Several options were considered during the investigation. At first, Alfonso was suspected, but then all attention turned to Manuel. However, he had an alibi and had no motive to harm Assunta, so he was quickly dismissed as a suspect. Surprisingly, the DNA was identified as belonging to a stranger named Ramra, a Colombian citizen who lived in Madrid, about a 6-hour drive from Santiago, where the incident occurred. This may seem strange. When questioned, Ramra fervently denied any connection to the case, claiming he had never been to Santiago and had no involvement in the murder. Indeed, Ramra had an alibi. He was having dinner at a restaurant in Madrid with his girlfriend and was captured on CCTV footage there. Why had Assunta been taking prescription drugs in the months leading up to the incident without any prescription? Further examinations revealed that only a portion of the DNA traces found belonged to Ramra. The lab staff suggested that the match could be due to poor quality samples or contamination. There were even suggestions that someone might have intentionally tampered with the sample's DNA to mislead the investigation. At this stage, many questions remained unanswered, and detectives considered even the most unlikely scenarios. Rosario and Alfonso seemed indifferent to what happened to their adopted daughter. Rosario was the last person to see Assunta alive, and the press speculated that she could have acted alone. Despite her fragile appearance, but investigators doubted she could physically manage Assunta's body. Using cell phone towers, police tried to determine the whereabouts of Rosario and Alfonso at the time of the incident. On that day, their phones were turned off. This makes the police even more suspicious of them. However, Rosario explained it was a coincidence, and their phones just run out of battery at the same time. They don't have any bad intentions. After talking to a local pharmacist, who was also a friend of Rosario's, they discovered that Rosario first contacted the pharmacist on July 5th. The day after an intruder broke into the house and attacked Assunta. After that, this drug lorazepam was purchased in large quantities by Rosario. Considering all the circumstances, the detectives decided to arrest Alfonso Botera. Some of Assunta's teachers had noticed unusual behavior in her. One day, Assunta attended her violin lesson with her father, Alfonso, and she seemed unable to control herself. Alfonso explained that his daughter was just under the influence of allergy medication. The teachers observed that she was usually very reserved and did not share her problems. The drowsiness incident occurred repeatedly, but the parents always had excuses, typically citing her health condition. The teacher was suspicious and distrustful of the girl's parents. When the police interviewed Assunta's teacher, she described Assunta's symptoms and behavior, which matched many side effects of the medication. 2 days before the tragedy, the last suspicious incident happened. On that day, Rosario informed the teacher that her daughter couldn't attend class due to a severe reaction to prescribed medications. After hearing this, the detectives were convinced that the adoptive parents knew about the medications and attempted to poison Assunta. Although Rosario and Alfonso were divorced, but Alfonso was determined to reconcile with she. In June 2013, 3 months before the tragedy, Rosario experienced a nervous breakdown and was hospitalized. During this time, Alfonso moved back in, feeling optimistic as his wish to reunite with his family seemed to be coming true. During this period, Rosario ended her relationship with her lover. Alfonso visited her in the hospital and cared for her after her discharge. It seemed like family matters were improving, but later it was revealed that she had lied, she continuing her affair and meeting her lover on the day of the murder. Given the new information, the investigation believes that Alfonso sought revenge. Perhaps he wanted to cause Rosario more pain than he had to endure from her betrayal. This could explain why the orange rope ended up in the trash at the country house. It was simply tossed there by Alfonso. However, why was Rosario so alarmed when the police arrived, and why did she immediately check the trash? She likely knew about these items and was an accomplice. The police have discovered a new clue. Whenever Alfonso was at home with Rosario and Assunta, the little girl be drugged with lorazepam. However, Alfonso refused to comment on this, claiming he was not guilty. After the arrest, Rosario's behavior was unstable, alternating between hysteria and depression. Meanwhile, Alfonso remained quiet and calm, he constantly trying to reassure Rosario's by saying they just needed to love and support each other, and that everything would soon be over. Despite his soothing words, the police noticed his cold demeanor. Eventually, the police found the storage media Alfonso used. It turned out that the hard drive on his laptop had been completely replaced. Experts discovered that over 500,000 photos and videos had been stored on it, likely compromising material. The police also found that he had an unhealthy interest in Asian girls on his social media page. Evidence showed he had dozens of interactions and correspondence with Asian girls, and according to investigators, the photos suggested these girls were minors. Additionally, he often showed interest in adult Asian women with very youthful appearances. Later, a woman who owned an escort agency approached the police. She confessed that Alfonso was a regular at her establishment, always requesting only Asian women and insisting they dress as schoolgirls. Even his wife was aware of this preference. Photos of the murdered Assunta in revealing clothes made the situation even more serious. The prosecutor focused on how the seemingly calm and quiet Alfonso had cruelly treated his adopted daughter Assunta. The charges suggested that Rosario and Alfonso were criminals covering for each other, with both involved Assunta's death. What could have motivated the crime? Rosario and Alfonso refused to cooperate with the investigation and wouldn't communicate without their lawyers. Later, on their attorney's advice, they completely stopped commenting on the tragedy. Forensic psychiatrists were crucial to the investigation. They analyzed Rosario and Alfonso's behavior and identified them as narcissists with personality disorders. It appeared they adopted Assunta to present a loving family image, pressured by Rosario's parents. Sadly, Assunta became a mere pawn for them, and once she was no longer needed, they first exploited her and then decided to eliminate her. A 15-year-old acquaintance of Assunta testified for the prosecution. Although Alfonso claimed he stayed home all day until the evening on the day of the murder, this was proven false. The girl saw him around 6 p.m. near Rosario's house, a fact later confirmed by camera footage. Alfonso was captured on camera at 9 p.m. after Assunta had disappeared. These conflicting details added to the evidence against Rosario and Alfonso. The trial was highly controversial, with even the judge's conduct coming under scrutiny. Many suspected he sought fame, suspicions that were later validated when he authored a book about the case after the trial concluded. Relatives and neighbors of the Botera family watched for years as the foster parents tried to create the best environment for Assunta. They are financially well off, ambitious and have a tough personality, but those close to them notice their devotion to Assunta. Many people still believe that the trial's outcome was a miscarriage of justice. In court, Rosario and Alfonso maintained their innocence. Alfonso remained calm and reasonable, while Rosario often cried, became hysterical. She puzzled in her testimony in justifying his behavior with the effects of the drug. Rosario's cousin testified at the trial and shared some new information. In 2011 and 2012, Rosario's parents both passed away suddenly at home. Their deaths were suspected to be under unusual circumstances. The cousin believed that Rosario was involved in the murders of her parents and daughter to inherit the entire property. However, the defense attorney rejected these claims. Rosario's mother passed away at the age of 77 and her father passed away at the age of 88. Both passed away peacefully from old age in their sleep in their beds. Although doctors found nothing unusual, their bodies, like Asunta's, were cremated, making it impossible to verify any unnatural causes of death. Meanwhile, the prosecutor contended that Rosario and Alfonso were true sociopaths. Alfonso was apparently a pedophile who drugged his daughter and chose to record these incidents. Asunta posed a threat of exposing them, leading to the decision to eliminate her. This theory was supported by numerous photographs and evidence indicating that Alfonso had an unhealthy obsession with young Asian girls. It is likely that Rosario was complicit in these activities or was at least aware of them but chose to protect Alfonso's wrongdoings. Alternatively, Rosario might have seen the girl as a burden and decided to eliminate little girl with the help of Alfonso. On October 30, 2015, the court found Rosario and Alfonso guilty and sentenced each to 18 years in prison. After beginning their sentences, they both appealed, but their appeals were rejected. On November 18, 2020, Rosario was discovered dead in her prison cell with a belt around her neck. This was her third try to end her life. Alfonso remains imprisoned and maintains his innocence. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Asunta Botera. Rosario Porto and her husband, Alfonso Botera, were wealthy individuals. Rosario's father served as an influential French consul, and her mother was an art teacher. Rosario followed in his father's footsteps. She became a successful lawyer. In 1997, she was appointed French consul. She inherited this post from her father. Alfonso was a well-known journalist. He and Rosario married in 1996 and they moved to a large apartment in an upscale area of Santiago de Compostela, Spain. Rosario had lupus erythematosus, which led doctors to advise against pregnancy. They decided to adopt a child abandoned by his parents and create a loving home for him. Adoption was challenging in Spain, so when they were in their early 30s, they chose to go to China for adoption. After navigating numerous bureaucratic hurdles, they arrived at an orphanage. Rosario immediately noticed a 9-month-old girl, and within 2 weeks, they resolved all issues to officially adopt her. When returning to Spain, the child's documents named her Asunta Fon Yan. This was notable since Asunta was among the first Chinese children adopted in the area. Initially, it seemed fortunate for her to join a respected and wealthy family, but unfortunately, this joy did not last long. Asunta was a highly capable girl. She excelled academically, studied multiple languages, practiced ballet, and attended music school. It seems that Rosario and Alfonso want to give her every opportunity to develop. On July 4, 2013, Rosario and her 12-year-old daughter, Asunta, went to the beach to cool off on a hot day. Asunta told a terrifying story about a man wearing a black mask and gloves who tried to strangle her the night before. The longer the girl talked, the more she lost control, and finally, her mother cried. She knew about it, she was there when it happened, but for some reason she did not contact the police. On the night of September 21, 2013, at 10:30 p.m., Rosario and Alfonso were at the police station for another reason. They reported their daughter, Asunta, was missing for several hours. Then, Rosario recounted Asunta's story of the attempted attack from 2.5 months prior. This left them fearful that the attacker had returned and something terrible might have happened to their daughter. They were terrified she had been kidnapped. Alfonso was convinced she was no longer alive. They urgently pleaded with the police to take immediate action. In the early hours of September 22, 2 men were driving through a forest on their way back from a bar. Suddenly, the driver stopped, saying he noticed something unusual in the forest. He didn't understand what was going on. so he turned his headlights toward the forest and mentioned to his friend that he felt like someone was watching them. Despite this, he wasn't scared, likely due to the alcohol he had consumed, so he got out of the car and walked a few steps into the forest. In the light of the car's headlights, he saw something on the ground that looked like a doll. As he approached, he realized it was a girl. She was tied up, and her clothes were dirty. He checked for a pulse and found that the girl was dead. Then, they quickly contacted the police. The police identified the body as Assunta, who had died just a week before her 13th birthday. While examining the area near her body, they discovered her mobile phone, which contained some disturbing photographs. There are several photos of she wrapped tightly, lying with her eyes wide open. Some forensic experts suggested her dilated pupils indicated possible drug use. Even more distressing were photos of the girl in revealing clothing, with bright makeup, fishnet stockings, and posing provocatively on a couch. Her eyes remained wide open, and her pupils were dilated. These photos later appeared on the internet, were widely circulated and making people angry about how a child was treated like that. Assunta's last day was described by her parents as ordinary. However, then little girl suddenly went missing and was found dead a few hours after they reported her disappearance. On that day, the girl went to visit her father, Alfonso, at his work, and then hurried back home, so she not wanting to miss The Simpsons at about 7 p.m. After she returned home, Rosario, her mother, came back from work and saw her daughter in her room, where she had her books spread out on the floor for homework. Rosario didn't notice anything unusual and left to go to their country house, which was about half an hour away, to pick up bathing suits and other items for a planned beach outing the next day. Rosario returned around 9:30 p.m., and by then, Assunta was no longer in the apartment. Rosario became worried because little girl hadn't called or mentioned any plans to go out, which was unusual for her. Thinking maybe she had gone to see friends, Rosario started calling the girl's friends and Alfonso, but nobody had seen she. Rosario was the last person to see Assunta alive, making her one of the first individuals the detectives focused on, and she was questioned at the station. During her discussion with the police, Rosario recalled the incidents of July 4th, the night of the first attack. When they returned from the store that evening, Assunta closed the front door but left the key in the lock. Her mother didn't notice, and they went to bed. Around 3 a.m., Rosario was awakened by cries for help. Rosario rushed to her daughter's room and saw a large man pinning little girl to the floor, seemingly trying to strangle her. She attacked the intruder, but he was very strong and easily threw her against the wall. Fortunately, no one was harmed, and the attacker fled. Rosario described him as a strong, middle-aged man dressed in black, wearing a mask and gloves, so it is not possible to give a more detailed description. Assunta told her friend about what happened and even sent several photos showing red marks on her neck. Assunta's father, Alfonso, mentioned that little girl had struggled with depression for a long time and was taking medication prescribed by doctors. This was confirmed because Assunta talked to friends and shared her experiences. Recently, she had been speaking more positively about her situation, saying she felt much better. However, after Assunta was first attacked, Rosario did not investigate to find out what was happening to her daughter. She cited Assunta's fragile emotional state and said she feared contacting police would upset Assunta. This explanation was not very convincing. Over the years, Assunta had been admitted to a psychiatric hospital because she often expressed end-her-life thoughts. Besides, she is very tired because of the overload of knowledge at school and extra classes. The nanny also said that Rosario had recently become very frustrated with Assunta, as little girl was no longer meeting Rosario's expectations, and her academic performance had declined. She had become somewhat of a burden, prompting Rosario to consider sending her to study in Poland. However, Rosario did not mention this to the detectives, so they decided to investigate Rosario's immediately. They were particularly interested in the country house Rosario visited on the day Assunta disappeared. As it turned out, when detectives got there, they found Assunta's body lying just 4 kilometers away. Rosario appeared surprised to see them. She was furious. She quickly headed to the second floor, clearly trying to hide something. When a detective checked a nearby trash can, he found a piece of orange rope inside, identical to the one used to tie Assunta's hands and feet. There was also a black mask and gloves. All these items were collected for examination, but unfortunately, no fingerprints or DNA were found. The investigative committee conducted several autopsies. They did not measure the body temperature immediately, fearing it might compromise the evidence, so the exact time of death couldn't be determined. However, it was estimated that Assunta was killed around 8 p.m. The cause of death was suffocation. Her mouth and nose were covered with a soft object, likely a pillow, which prevented her from breathing, leading to unconsciousness and eventually death. In addition, an autopsy determined that Assunta had taken at least 27 lorazepam pills on the day of her death, 9 times the normal amount for an adult. Hair tests revealed this was not the first occurrence. Little girl had overdoses 3 months before her death, starting when the attacker first breaks into the home. It's important to note that overdoses of this drug can cause amnesia and loss of muscle control. The drug was used to treat anxiety disorders and insomnia. The police discovered that Rosario used it to combat depression, but it was not prescribed for Assunta. No one could explain why Assunta took the drug. According to Rosario, the criminals gave Assunta medicine so she wouldn't remember the incident. Detectives conducted a review of CCTV footage in the area to track Assunta's movements that day. Around 2 p.m., she visited her father, Alfonso. At 5:21 p.m., she returned home, and at 5:28 p.m., Rosario returned home. At 6:20 p.m., a gas station camera recorded a green Mercedes belonging to Rosario. She admitted the car was moving towards a house in the country. It was clear that besides the driver, there was a girl in the car, identified as Assunta. They were heading in the direction where Assunta's body was later found. The new testimony completely contradicted Rosario's earlier statements, making she the primary suspect in the murder. Therefore, she was questioned again. Rosario's face showed fear and shame because she had let her adopted daughter go missing while she was responsible for taking care of the girl. Then, she offered a different version of events. According to her, they went out to get swimsuits together, but when they arrived at the country house, Assunta refused to enter with her. Assunta chose to stay in the car while Rosario took everything she needed and did some small work. However, this took longer than expected, and Assunta wanted to return home to do chores and rest. Rosario agreed and drove her daughter back. But she dropped her daughter off about a 20-minute walk from their apartment to avoid navigating the narrow streets. However, the police reviewed CCTV footage from the outskirts of Santiago but found no evidence of Rosario taking her daughter back home. They only saw footage of Rosario leaving her country house alone around 9 p.m. Her story is full of controversial and contradictory details. She appeared to look at the detectives with arrogance, displaying coldness and showing no regret over the loss of her child. She persistently insisted that the large man in black was involved in the incident. When the police interviewed the Botera family's neighbors, one mentioned hearing screams at night in July, when Assunta was first attacked. He also observed something unusual. Even though the attacker entered an area where dogs lived, the dogs were silent, indicating that the attacker was very familiar with them. All in all, everything seemed suspicious, making them even more suspicious that Rosario and Alfonso were involved in the murder of their adopted daughter. The police considered different theories about the first home invasion. Some thought it was fabricated by Rosario, while others suspected it was the parents' first attempt at murder. few believed an outsider was involved. On September 24th, Rosario and Alfonso held a funeral, during which they behaved oddly, even taking a selfie in front of the coffin. Due to inconsistencies in her testimony, Rosario was arrested after the funeral. By then, detectives had discovered what might have been the motive behind the crime. Witnesses came forward with information about incident from 9 months prior to the tragedy, and this may have been the beginning of the bloody end. In January 2013, Rosario started a relationship with a realtor named Manuel Garcia, whom she hired to sell real estate. Manuel was married and made it clear he would not leave his family. He considers the relationship with Rosario to be nothing more than an affair. Rosario was fine with this, and their secret relationship continued. During this time, her relationship with her husband, Alfonso, quickly deteriorated. She finds Alfonso boring and considers him a failure who overestimates himself. She described him as insensitive, while her lover, Manuel, was the complete opposite. After Alfonso finds messages from Rosario's lover on his wife's phone, they divorced in February 2013. Rosario and her daughter Assunta continued living in the apartment. She maintained her business and visited a country house. Custody of the daughter, Assunta, was shared, and both parents have the right to see the little girl. After Assunta's parents divorced, she lived in both her father's and her mother's houses. Many observed that she was always close to her mother, while her relationship with her father was not as warm. However, her father made efforts to improve their relationship. He also repeatedly told his ex-wife Rosario that they would be forever tied together through their adopted daughter. Is it possible that because Rosario wants to completely cut off contact with her ex-husband, so she will cause the innocent child to leave forever? It is known that earlier in the summer, Rosario had to end her relationship with her lover, Manuel. Alfonso took advantage of the opportunity, he convincing Rosario to end her relationship with Manuel in exchange for his help with their daughter while she was in the hospital. And Rosario agreed to this request. However, it was revealed that on September 21st, Rosario broke her promise, she spending most of the day with Manuel and only returning home in the evening. This is very suspicious, because soon after, Assunta was killed. During the investigation, numerous assumptions were made, including one significant point emphasized by the defense. They argued that male DNA was found on the clothes Assunta's, indicating a man's involvement. While it was considered possible that the mother was not involved in the crime, this scenario was deemed unlikely. Police have stepped up their investigation, collecting documents for analysis, focusing on identifying male DNA on Assunta's body. Several options were considered during the investigation. At first, Alfonso was suspected, but then all attention turned to Manuel. However, he had an alibi and had no motive to harm Assunta, so he was quickly dismissed as a suspect. Surprisingly, the DNA was identified as belonging to a stranger named Ramra, a Colombian citizen who lived in Madrid, about a 6-hour drive from Santiago, where the incident occurred. This may seem strange. When questioned, Ramra fervently denied any connection to the case, claiming he had never been to Santiago and had no involvement in the murder. Indeed, Ramra had an alibi. He was having dinner at a restaurant in Madrid with his girlfriend and was captured on CCTV footage there. Why had Assunta been taking prescription drugs in the months leading up to the incident without any prescription? Further examinations revealed that only a portion of the DNA traces found belonged to Ramra. The lab staff suggested that the match could be due to poor quality samples or contamination. There were even suggestions that someone might have intentionally tampered with the sample's DNA to mislead the investigation. At this stage, many questions remained unanswered, and detectives considered even the most unlikely scenarios. Rosario and Alfonso seemed indifferent to what happened to their adopted daughter. Rosario was the last person to see Assunta alive, and the press speculated that she could have acted alone. despite her fragile appearance, but investigators doubted she could physically manage Assunta's body. Using cell phone towers, police tried to determine the whereabouts of Rosario and Alfonso at the time of the incident. On that day, their phones were turned off. This makes the police even more suspicious of them. However, Rosario explained it was a coincidence, and their phones just run out of battery at the same time. They don't have any bad intentions. After talking to a local pharmacist, who was also a friend of Rosario's, they discovered that Rosario first contacted the pharmacist on July 5th, the day after an intruder broke into the house and attacked Assunta. After that, this drug lorazepam was purchased in large quantities by Rosario. Considering all the circumstances, the detectives decided to arrest Alfonso Botera. Some of Assunta's teachers had noticed unusual behavior in her. One day, Assunta attended her violin lesson with her father, Alfonso, and she seemed unable to control herself. Alfonso explained that his daughter was just under the influence of allergy medication. The teachers observed that she was usually very reserved and did not share her problems. The drowsiness incident occurred repeatedly, but the parents always had excuses, typically citing her health condition. The teacher was suspicious and distrustful of the girl's parents. When the police interviewed Assunta's teacher, she described Assunta's symptoms and behavior, which matched many side effects of the medication. 2 days before the tragedy, the last suspicious incident happened. On that day, Rosario informed the teacher that her daughter couldn't attend class due to a severe reaction to prescribed medications. After hearing this, the detectives were convinced that the adoptive parents knew about the medications and attempted to poison Assunta. Although Rosario and Alfonso were divorced, but Alfonso was determined to reconcile with she. In June 2013, 3 months before the tragedy, Rosario experienced a nervous breakdown and was hospitalized. During this time, Alfonso moved back in, feeling optimistic as his wish to reunite with his family seemed to be coming true. During this period, Rosario ended her relationship with her lover. Alfonso visited her in the hospital and cared for her after her discharge. It seemed like family matters were improving, but later it was revealed that she had lied, she continuing her affair and meeting her lover on the day of the murder. Given the new information, the investigation believes that Alfonso sought revenge. Perhaps he wanted to cause Rosario more pain than he had to endure from her betrayal. This could explain why the orange rope ended up in the trash at the country house. It was simply tossed there by Alfonso. However, why was Rosario so alarmed when the police arrived, and why did she immediately check the trash? She likely knew about these items and was an accomplice. The police have discovered a new clue. Whenever Alfonso was at home with Rosario and Assunta, the little girl be drugged with lorazepam. However, Alfonso refused to comment on this, claiming he was not guilty. After the arrest, Rosario's behavior was unstable, alternating between hysteria and depression. Meanwhile, Alfonso remained quiet and calm, he constantly trying to reassure Rosario's by saying they just needed to love and support each other, and that everything would soon be over. Despite his soothing words, the police noticed his cold demeanor. Eventually, the police found the storage media Alfonso used. It turned out that the hard drive on his laptop had been completely replaced. Experts discovered that over 500,000 photos and videos had been stored on it, likely compromising material. The police also found that he had an unhealthy interest in Asian girls on his social media page. Evidence showed he had dozens of interactions and correspondence with Asian girls, and according to investigators, the photos suggested these girls were minors. Additionally, he often showed interest in adult Asian women with very youthful appearances. Later, a woman who owned an escort agency approached the police. She confessed that Alfonso was a regular at her establishment, always requesting only Asian women and insisting they dress as schoolgirls. Even his wife was aware of this preference. Photos of the murdered Assunta in revealing clothes made the situation even more serious. The prosecutor focused on how the seemingly calm and quiet Alfonso had cruelly treated his adopted daughter Assunta. The charges suggested that Rosario and Alfonso were criminals covering for each other, with both involved Assunta's death. What could have motivated the crime? Rosario and Alfonso refused to cooperate with the investigation and wouldn't communicate without their lawyers. Later, on their attorney's advice, they completely stopped commenting on the tragedy. Forensic psychiatrists were crucial to the investigation. They analyzed Rosario and Alfonso's behavior and identified them as narcissists with personality disorders. It appeared they adopted Assunta to present a loving family image, pressured by Rosario's parents. Sadly, Assunta became a mere pawn for them, and once she was no longer needed, they first exploited her and then decided to eliminate her. A 15-year-old acquaintance of Assunta testified for the prosecution. Although Alfonso claimed he stayed home all day until the evening on the day of the murder, this was proven false. The girl saw him around 6 p.m. near Rosario's house, a fact later confirmed by camera footage. Alfonso was captured on camera at 9 p.m. after Assunta had disappeared. These conflicting details added to the evidence against Rosario and Alfonso. The trial was highly controversial, with even the judge's conduct coming under scrutiny. Many suspected he sought fame, suspicions that were later validated when he authored a book about the case after the trial concluded. Relatives and neighbors of the Botera family watched for years as the foster parents tried to create the best environment for Assunta. They are financially well off, ambitious and have a tough personality, but those close to them notice their devotion to Assunta. Many people still believe that the trial's outcome was a miscarriage of justice. In court, Rosario and Alfonso maintained their innocence. Alfonso remained calm and reasonable, while Rosario often cried, became hysterical. She puzzled in her testimony in justifying his behavior with the effects of the drug. Rosario's cousin testified at the trial and shared some new information. In 2011 and 2012, Rosario's parents both passed away suddenly at home. Their deaths were suspected to be under unusual circumstances. The cousin believed that Rosario was involved in the murders of her parents and daughter to inherit the entire property. However, the defense attorney rejected these claims. Rosario's mother passed away at the age of 77 and her father passed away at the age of 88. Both passed away peacefully from old age in their sleep in their beds. Although doctors found nothing unusual, their bodies, like Assunta's, were cremated, making it impossible to verify any unnatural causes of death. Meanwhile, the prosecutor contended that Rosario and Alfonso were true sociopaths. Alfonso was apparently a pedophile who drugged his daughter and chose to record these incidents. Assunta posed a threat of exposing them, leading to the decision to eliminate her. This theory was supported by numerous photographs and evidence indicating that Alfonso had an unhealthy obsession with young Asian girls. It is likely that Rosario was complicit in these activities or was at least aware of them but chose to protect Alfonso's wrongdoings. Alternatively, Rosario might have seen the girl as a burden and decided to eliminate little girl with the help of Alfonso. On October 30, 2015, the court found Rosario and Alfonso guilty and sentenced each to 18 years in prison. After beginning their sentences, they both appealed, but their appeals were rejected. On November 18, 2020, Rosario was discovered dead in her prison cell with a belt around her neck. This was her third try to end her life. Alfonso remains imprisoned and maintains his innocence. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Matthew Winkler. Matthew Winkler was born in November 1974 and was the youngest child in his family. He had a brother named Daniel. The family lived in Huntington, Nancy, USA, a small town with fewer than 5,000 people, known for its long history of serving the church. Matthew's grandfather played a significant role in the community as a third-generation Christian minister and was the principal of a school for preachers in the town. Additionally, he authored several books on biblical theology. Matthew's father was also a pastor, and the Winkler family was highly respected in society due to their religious commitment. Father Dan started his career 5 years after Matthew was born. While in high school, he began building a small church, which was completed during his college years. After finishing university, he became a pastor and met his future wife, Diana. They married in 1970 and later had sons. Due to Dan's preaching duties, the family often moved, even to different states, which helped shape their character. Eventually, the Matthew family settled in Austin, Texas. Matthew began attending high school regularly and was an athletic teenager who loved football and worked out almost daily. He was active, energetic, and creative, participating in church puppet shows. Matthew was a kind and popular classmate. After graduating, his parents invited him to serve in the church, marking his first steps toward becoming a pastor. Matthew enrolled at Freed Harmon College in Nancy. Matthew's family was generally happy, with Dan imposing strict rules at home that seemed appropriate for raising 2 sons. In 1993, the family moved again to a large city in New York State, where Dan worked as a missionary for 11 years. A few months later, Matthew met Mary, a modest but charming student at the university. Mary was a year older than Matthew. Their relationship developed quickly and they began dating. Just 3 months later, Mary announced to her parents that she was introducing them to her boyfriend. The meeting went well. Matthew impressed her devout family, and they approved of the relationship. 6 months later, Matthew proposed to Mary, and she accepted. They were married on April 20, 1994. Mary Freemans was born in 1973 as the eldest child in her family, who were living in the United States at the time. The Mary were devoutly religious and regularly attended the Church of Christ, where Mary's father was the pastor. The family later welcomed the second daughter, Patricia, who faced significant health challenges, including cerebral palsy, spinal meningitis, and developmental disabilities. Despite these challenges, her parents were dedicated to supporting her, teaching her to read, although she struggled with comprehension. Despite their difficulties, Mary and Patricia shared a very close bond. Mary, who was calm, reserved, obedient, and somewhat meek, often slept with Patricia to comfort her. While Mary was in elementary school, her parents decided to adopt a little girl named Shauna. Shauna came from a large family with 4 other siblings who were also placed with different adoptive families. Eventually, all the siblings, including Shauna, were returned to their biological parents. Mary experienced her first major trauma on April 15, 1987, when her younger sister died from a heart attack while taking a bath at the age of 11. This devastating loss affected Mary deeply, and at 13, she sought help from a school psychologist to process her grief. Unfortunately, when her father found out about this, he became angry and demanded that the psychologist stop interfering, believing that he and his wife should resolve the situation themselves. As a result, Mary lacked emotional support from her parents, which led to her developing post-traumatic stress disorder and many other psychological issues that she struggled with throughout her life. Mary's family then adopted 11-year-old Shannon and her 4 siblings, making their dream of having a large family come true. Mary, being the eldest child, took on a supportive role, helping her mother and guiding her younger siblings. Mary then met Matthew, and they began a romance. They began dating and often skipped school to spend time together. When they found out Mary was pregnant, they decided to drop out of school. They married and moved to Knoxville, where they lived in a small apartment near Mary's parents. Matthew found work on a construction site. During this time, he felt exhausted by the physical demands of his job and the challenges of their marriage that they were beginning to experience. Matthew began to take his stress out on his wife. He felt resentment towards Mary for dropping out of school and for the difficult situation they were in, especially while his friends were living carefree lives. In order to support his family, Matthew had to work hard. Eventually, he decided to quit his job and start looking for a new job back home. During this time, Mary faced new challenges when her mother was diagnosed with cancer. Despite the support of her family and her mother's treatment at a specialist clinic, sadly her mother passed away in April 1999. The loss had a profound impact on the entire family. Mary's father was left to care for 5 children on his own, leaving her adopted siblings to seek Mary's help more often. Although she supported them as much as she could, she was unable to spend all her time with them as she was pregnant with her second child and responsible for her new baby. In June 1999, the Matthew family began searching for a home. With limited financial resources, they purchased a small, modest house that was still under construction in the small town of Pegram, which had a population of only 2,000. This town was located 15 kilometers from the church where Matthew had secured a job as a pastor. The family moved into their new house in preparation for the birth of their second daughter. Mary began to experience postpartum depression and faced many challenges during this time. Along with caring for her children, she also took on the responsibility of caring for her foster siblings, who were often demanding and difficult. This behavior frustrated both Mary and her husband, Matthew. Eventually, she began to withdraw from her relatives, possibly due to the constant pressure from her husband and foster siblings. A family friend described Mary as modest, shy, homely, and somewhat peculiar. She struggled with social interactions, had a limited circle of friends, and tended to be reserved. At the same time, she experienced unpredictable mood swings, which sometimes upset her husband. Mary began to complain about sexual violence from her husband. However, he did not consider his actions to be the problem. Instead, he believed that it was Mary's rigidity that caused the problem. After a particularly tense argument, Mary invited her 2 brothers to stay overnight because she felt unsafe being alone with her husband. During that time, Matthew realized that they needed to stay away from her family to reduce their influence on his family life. After they moved away, Matthew's marriage began to improve. Mary described the transition as challenging but felt relieved that they had worked through their issues together. The couple bought a house in the small town of Markmenville. At this time, Mary was pregnant again and was excited at the prospect of having a large family, like hers. Unfortunately, Mary later suffered a miscarriage. In the new town, Mary's family met nice neighbors. Matthew's pastoral career is booming, but it requires him to travel frequently, which means he is often away from home. Matthew is looking forward to being promoted to pastor of the local church. Meanwhile, Mary takes a part-time job to help support the family financially. Matthew also worked part-time teaching Bible lessons at Boyd Christian School. He was highly regarded as a specialist and was seen as a positive influence who instilled religious values in his parishioners. He earned the respect of the entire community. However, those who worked closely with Matthew noticed a different side. He was often arrogant and caused tension whenever he was in the office. Mary brought him lunch every day, and although she was very attentive, Matthew treated her with disdain. This angered his secretary. Because of what she considered unacceptable behavior for a man of his faith. No one suspected that Matthew was behaving badly at home. Behind closed doors, he abused his wife. This continued until one day Mary showed up with a black eye, causing concern in the local community. She claimed it was an accident but would not explain how she got the bruise. Rumors began to spread that Matthew might be harming her, including sexually, and his addiction became a topic of conversation in the community. It's unclear if this contributed to Matthew's professional downfall, but in 2004, he lost his job as a church pastor. A more reputable preacher was hired to take his place, which drove Matthew into a frenzy as he had to search for work again. The Matthew family relocated to another city to start anew. There, Matthew finds work at a local church, and Mary is pregnant with another baby girl. However, the transition was not without its challenges. Soon after moving in, conflicts arose with the neighbors due to a dog that lived nearby. The Mary was worried that the dog might bite her children and even threatened to shoot it, which led to resistance from the neighbors. Meanwhile, at his new job at the church, Matthew's behavior changed dramatically. There, he was seen as a polite, caring, loving husband, admired as the head of a wonderful family. For a time, he struggled to maintain this positive image. Brett Glenn, a family friend with close ties to Matthew's family, supported him. While Matthew's family was attending the wedding anniversary of his best friend Brett, Matthew saw that Brett's family had bought a pistol for self-defense. Matthew thought that their family should also have a pistol at home. Matthew then took Mary to the shooting range to learn. However, soon after, strange events began to occur in Matthew's family. At that time, after giving birth, Mary enrolled in a teacher training program at the university. She wanted to get an education and find a job caring for sick children. On December 1, 2005, Mary received a check that appeared to be a lottery prize. She needed money to pay her insurance premiums, so she took out a loan while she waited for the lottery payout and also took out a similar loan from the bank. Unfortunately, it turned out to be a scam, leaving her in a difficult situation. She opened an account to deposit a large sum of money, but the check was fake. Mary attempted to commit financial fraud in the hopes of obtaining $6,500, but her scheme was too naive to succeed and was eventually discovered. In February 2006, she realized that her financial transaction had been declined. She then contacted the bank and changed the postal address of her account to a rented post office box, indicating her intention to commit fraud. She then opened a new bank account using only her cell phone number and postal address as her contact information. This account had a balance of $100, which she used to go to the bank and attempt to withdraw $7,000 to pay off her previous debt. She then redirected all of her mail to the rented post office box. Meanwhile, Matthew received congratulations from his father for their improving financial situation, completely unaware of the chaos his wife was causing. They had nearly paid off their debts thanks to compensation from an accident a few months earlier. Ironically, while Matthew focused on enhancing their financial well-being, Mary was engaged in fraudulent activities, making their situation even worse. The following day, the bank administration reached out to Mary to inform her that her transaction was illegal and that there were insufficient funds to fulfill her requested amounts. They insisted that she come to the branch with her husband to speak with the manager and resolve the issue. However, instead of discussing it with her husband, Mary chose to remain silent. A bank employee suggested that she take out a $5,000 loan to cover the shortfall, which would allow her to move on from the situation. Yet, since the account was joint with her husband, Mary could not make this decision without his approval, so she left without a solution. Later, bank employees contacted Mary again, warning her that she needed to address the issue urgently, or she could face criminal charges for fraud. They reiterated the loan offer, which would enable her to settle the debt related to counterfeit checks. Mary said she would consider it. While she was contemplating her options, a tragic event occurred on March 22, 2006. The Matthew were expected to attend the church service with the parishioners, and their 3 daughters were also supposed to join the other children. However, when the time came, the entire family was absent. This raised suspicions since the pastor's family was known for never missing significant events. After a brief wait, the elder called their home, but there was no answer, which was unusual for church ministers. Additionally, Matthew was scheduled to deliver an important sermon that day, leading everyone present to suspect that something was amiss. A church minister visited Matthew and Mary's home to check on them. The lights were on, and the TV was blaring, but nobody responded to his calls or knocks at the door. The minister tried looking through the windows but couldn't see inside. He then sought help from neighbors and fellow church members. After an extensive search, they found spare keys in a shed on the property. At around 9 p.m., they finally opened the door to the house. When they entered, the pastors witnessed a horrifying scene. In the couple's bedroom, they discovered Matthew's body on the floor, surrounded by a pool of blood. The church pastors then called 911, prompting police and ambulances to arrive at the scene. Doctors confirmed Matthew was dead. Forensic experts began working to find evidence, but because the crime scene had many traces left by witnesses, it was difficult for them to collect evidence. Meanwhile, Mary and the children were missing from the house, and the family car was gone. Police suspected that the rest of the family may have been kidnapped and were in danger. At the time, no one could have imagined what had actually happened in the house. The autopsy report showed that Matthew had suffered a fatal gunshot wound to the chest and had bled to death. The police's investigation uncovered Mary's involvement in financial fraud, which tarnished her reputation. She was now seen as both a victim and a criminal due to her use of counterfeit checks. As a result, she, her children, and her car were placed on a wanted list. Police attempted to track her mobile phone and discovered that she was in Orange Beach, Alabama, approximately 600 kilometers from where the crime occurred. Police in that area were alerted and worked to apprehend her. On March 23, a police officer spotted a minivan making an illegal U-turn around 7:30 p.m. 3 police cars surrounded Mary's vehicle in a grocery store parking lot. The police acted carefully, fearing that she and her children might have been kidnapped and could be in danger. However, Mary was driving the minivan herself, and she was quickly arrested. She listened to her rights with a blank expression and went to the police station with her children. In the back seat of her car, they discovered a 12-gauge shotgun, and Matthew was shot with. Mary's daughters extremely frightened. Mary gave her relatives contact information so the children could be cared for while she was arrested. She faced criminal charges of check fraud and explained the circumstances surrounding her husband Matthew's death on the bedroom floor. Just a day after her arrest, Mary confessed that the previous day, she and her husband had had a minor argument, which led to them sleeping in separate rooms. She eventually retrieved a gun he had kept in the closet for protection. Mary said she could not remember the events clearly, feeling like she had amnesia. She recalled hearing a noise and then seeing her husband fall out of bed, gasping for air and covered in blood. Her account was a blur to her. She could not remember how she got the gun and shot him, nor could she explain her actions. 5 months after her arrest, Mary's father mortgaged their home to pay the $750,000 bail to get her out. After her release, Mary moved to Tennessee and worked at a dry cleaner while awaiting trial. Prosecutors argued that Mary had carefully planned the murder. She disabled Matthew's cell phone to prevent him from calling for help, leading to his death from blood loss. Mary knew where guns were kept in their home and had easy access to them. A handgun was identified as the murder weapon, but the motive for the crime remains a mystery. Mary, who used to be so quiet and gentle, and why she killed her husband, while the locals considered Matthew a holy man. The children stated that Matthew was a good father who never harmed them or their mother. They had never witnessed any arguments between their parents. One day, they were awakened by a loud noise and went to investigate. As they turned the corner in the hallway, They saw their father lying on the floor. However, their mother quickly closed the door in front of them, leaving the girls confused about what had happened. The prosecution alleged that Mary was experiencing financial difficulties that she tried to hide from her husband. This was difficult to maintain, as he would eventually discover her deception when he checked her bills. It is believed that after uncovering her fraud, Matthew was shot, or that she planned to kill him to prevent him from learning about her schemes. During the investigation, it was revealed that the check fraud was not Mary's only illegal activity. She had submitted a fake document to 5 banks, committing scams totaling $17,500. This type of fraud, known as check kiting, involves artificially inflating the balance on a bank account to access non-existent funds. Bank staff confirmed that they repeatedly asked Mary and her husband to meet with managers to resolve the issue of missing money. None of the banks reported her to the police, and they tried to resolve the situation amicably. However, Mary chose to ignore their requests because she wanted to hide her financial troubles from her husband. During the trial, Mary denied confessing to murdering her husband, claiming that she was in a state of shock. Her attorneys argued that her husband was a domestic abuser who not only assaulted her, but also raped her and coerced her into committing these acts of fraud. A key point of the defense concerned the murder weapon. They argued that loading the shotgun would have made a lot of noise, which would have woken her husband, suggesting that it had been loaded long before the crime occurred. Mary, unaware of the gun being ready, simply grabbed it to threaten her husband. Unfortunately, the gun accidentally discharged, resulting in her husband's death. Therefore, the defense asserted that the shooting was an accident. The scenario raises the question of why a loving wife would point a gun at her sleeping husband, even if her intention was to intimidate him, not shoot him. In court, Mary recounted the horrific experiences she endured living with a husband she described as a domestic tyrant. She accused him of sexual, emotional, and physical abuse. To illustrate her point, Mary produced a wig and high-heeled shoes that her husband forced her to wear, even wearing the shoes to court. She burst into tears upon seeing them again. Matthew's controlling behavior extended to how she dressed, as he forced her to wear revealing outfits and watch adult films. He pushed her toward intimate relationships that were unusual for her, even requiring her to get his approval to get a haircut. Despite this, she hid her shame and fear, concealing the truth about him. She described a home environment where he maintained strict control and harshly punished Mary for the smallest mistakes. She even feared he might be abusing their children. Over the years, this led her to build up significant resentment towards him. On the morning of the incident, Mary was awakened by her youngest daughter's crying at 6 o'clock. Frustrated, Matthew angrily pulled her out of bed, insisting that Mary go comfort their daughter. Mary complied and went to the nursery, but the youngest daughter continued to cry, which made Matthew even angrier. He ran into the room, picked up the baby, and covered her mouth and nose to silence her. Fearing for her daughter's safety, Mary begged her husband to give her the child. Finally, he returned his daughter to her and returned to the bedroom. Mary calmed her daughter, put her to bed, and then took a shotgun to confront her husband, accidentally shooting him in the process. Initially, Mary was confused and didn't comprehend what had just occurred. She saw her husband fall from the bed and hit his head. Fearing he had fallen and would be angry with her, she quickly left the bedroom. Listening for any signs that he might be pursuing her, Mary confirmed it was quiet and went back to the bedroom. It was then that she fully understood that she had shot Matthew. In a panic, she took the children and ran away from home. Mary explained that she lost control and shot her husband in a fit of rage due to his violent behavior toward the children and her. After he attacked them, he went to sleep, and in that moment of anguish, she accidentally shot him. However, the prosecutor disagreed with her testimony, finding it implausible and inconsistent with her initial interrogation. They argued that she killed Matthew to prevent him from discovering her financial fraud. The jury had to consider numerous documents and testimony, and consider several sentencing options for Mary Freemans. The lightest sentence was 1 year in prison, while the most severe was life in prison without parole. She also faced the possibility of losing her parental rights forever. After deliberating for about 8 hours, the jury returned a verdict on April 19, 2007, finding Mary guilty of manslaughter, which fell between the lightest and most severe sentences. The case was awaiting a final verdict from the judge, and Mary was expected to be sentenced to at least 6 years in prison. However, the judge's ruling came as a surprise. Mary Freemans was sentenced to just 210 days in prison, with the 5 months she had already served before the trial counting toward that sentence. After the sentencing, Mary was committed to a mental hospital for 60 days before being released. The judge and jury justified their lenient sentence by stating that they believed Mary and considered her a victim of domestic violence who had been pushed to her limits. Many local residents shared this belief, especially influenced by Mary's account of wearing stripper shoes, which the women of the small town found humiliating and expressed their support for her. The prosecution found the sentence unfair. They believed it was a premeditated murder because Mary deliberately picked up a gun and entered the bedroom without being pursued or in any danger. Once in the bedroom, she pointed the gun at her husband and shot him, showing that it was not an accidental murder. Despite their arguments, the court rejected their arguments and denied several appeals to reconsider the case. The decision was widely seen as unjust, leading to public outrage, particularly among the victims' relatives. In August 2008, Mary won full custody of her 3 daughters, who had been living with Matthew's parents. A custody battle ensued, with Matthew's relatives arguing that Mary was an unfit mother because she had killed her husband and had anger management issues. They expressed concern that she might resort to violence again. However, their arguments were unsuccessful and Mary was awarded custody of the children. She was not charged with any wrongdoing in connection with Matthew's death, and it was implied that she had been coerced into committing the crime. Mary worked at a dry cleaner's for a time before moving to a daycare near McMinnville. Unfortunately, neither of these jobs were long-term due to the negative attention she received from the public and media. Mary is now 50 years old, she lives a lonely life and no one knows where she is. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jennifer Morrissey. Michael was born in Pennsylvania in 1953. He later moved to Williamsport, Maryland. Overall, his childhood was quite normal. After graduating from high school, he went to college and quickly married his girlfriend, whom he had loved for several years. The feeling was mutual, so she readily agreed. Michael is a person who has tried his best to achieve success in his career, he becoming a well-known insurance agent in the city for some time. Though he was good at it, he eventually switched to pharmaceuticals, where his career truly flourished as a pharmaceutical representative. He started his own business and provided his family with a wonderful life. He earned well, and the family wanted for nothing. Unfortunately, his happy married life did not last long. For years after the birth of their children, Michael and his wife's relationship became cold, so they decided to divorce. Despite the divorce, but he and his wife remain on good terms, and the children still visit him regularly. The son and daughter later recalled that even during the divorce proceedings, they never saw their parents argue. Their relationship remained peaceful and respectful, even as they decided to end their marriage. A few years later, Michael moved to Bucks County, Pennsylvania, to start a new life. He plans to continue his business there until he retires. As a single man, Michael enjoyed his freedom and owned a large, beautiful house by the river. He developed an interest in art and began collecting valuable pieces. Although he didn't aim for world-class masterpieces, he has gathered a fascinating collection that he is very proud of. Michael remained a bachelor for a long time until 2012, when he met a 28-year-old single mother named Jennifer Morrissey. They quickly fell in love and moved into a more intimate relationship. The romance was intense and passionate. Soon, Michael invited Jennifer on a vacation to the Caribbean islands. On the trip, he brought 2 jet skis and 2 ATVs so that both could participate in the activities. He was deeply infatuated with Jennifer, and his relatives were amazed at how much he had changed. He even got his first tattoo in his life, dedicated to Jennifer. In 2015, after they had been dating for 3 years, Michael invited Jennifer to move into his house, and she agreed. He gave her everything, including a comfortable life. Jennifer's stepchild even has his own room. However, the idyll lasted until August 8 of that year, when Michael was found dead in his house. By this time, his relationship with Jennifer had been going on for 3 years, and they were planning a wedding. Earlier, colleagues found Michael lifeless in his home. They initially thought he might have died from a heart attack. When the rescue team arrived, they discovered he's sitting in a chair with his head tilted back. From behind, he appeared to be sleeping, but closer inspection revealed a pool of blood beneath him, with blood streaks around his mouth, nose, and chest. It became clear that he had not died from a heart attack but from gunshot wounds to the face. The wound between his eyes suggested that it was either murder or intentionally ended his life. Forensic experts began analyzing the scene and quickly ruled out intentionally ended his life. If he had shot himself, the gun would have fallen to the floor or at his feet, but the gun was missing. This indicated someone else was present at the time of his death, who pulled the trigger. Forensic experts expanded the search area and examined the living room. A .380 caliber cartridge case was found about 10 meters from Michael. There were no signs of a struggle inside the house, perhaps because the killer suddenly attacked him and acted abruptly. In addition, the watch, a laptop, and a cell phone of Michael's were also lost, indicating a robbery. It appears he witnessed a break-in, prompting the attacker to kill him to silence him. Further clues were found in Michael's bedroom. Investigators learned that he owned 2 registered guns. However, only one gun was found, and the holster for his Smith & Wesson .38 was empty. It was confirmed that he was shot with this missing gun. He had kept the gun for self-defense, indicating the perpetrator likely knew its location. There were no signs of a struggle, no injuries on Michael. This suggests the criminal knew the house, the location of the weapon, and how to escape unnoticed. As a result, investigators began testing people who had close contact with Michael to identify the suspect. The robbery theory quickly to unravel. Although Michael's pockets were empty, along with his cell phone, laptop, and watch were all lost, but other valuable objects remained intact. These valuable objects are highly visible, include his art collection, which featured some valuable pieces. Notably, each painting in his collection was lit up. The intruder didn't come to the house to rob but specifically to kill. Several items were taken to create a fake scene of a robbery, in order to mislead the investigation. One important piece of information is the disappearance of information storage devices, such as mobile phones and laptops, likely containing important, suggesting this was not accidental. The house was not broken into, the doors and windows are still intact. This suggests that either the perpetrator had access to the house or Michael let them in, likely because he trusted them. Upon investigating his recent life, the police found he had no known enemies. He had been in a long-term relationship with a woman named Jennifer Morrissey, who was 33 years old. Some neighbors noted that she was the fiancée of he. However, she had vanished without a trace, which seemed very suspicious. Neighbors described Jennifer as a rather private person who did not like to talk about herself or her past. It was known that she had conflicts with her mother. Jennifer recounted her difficult childhood living in her mother's house, and she had been abused a lot. She accused two men of repeatedly raping her during her teenage years. However, her mother did not believe it. So, she eventually dropped out of school and left home. She recalls this period as a difficult one, and she suffered from severe depression. After leaving home, Jennifer had to support herself, so she found work as a mechanic. She also bought a sporty motorcycle and enjoyed riding around the city in her free time. On social media, she often boasted about speeding on night roads, indicating her love for danger. She also was a thrill seeker and expressed some of her ideals through her tattoos, which included several words across her chest and biceps, as well as a grinning skull on her arm. Jennifer became a mother at 20. The child's biological father quickly abandoned them, so she worked hard to secure her child's future. Besides her mechanic job, she also worked as a dancer at a nightclub in Pennsylvania. It was there in 2012 that she met Michael McNew, a 59-year-old regular at the club. During one visit, they struck up a conversation, and he invited her to dinner. Jennifer agreed to the date on the condition that he pay her $1,200 electricity bill. They began frequently visiting upscale restaurants and expensive places. Michael showered her with lavish gifts, including jewelry, a motorcycle, and a car, and he also took her on trips. Jennifer started referring to him as her sugar daddy, and he was happy to support a beautiful young woman. Jennifer's life is quite difficult, so it's not surprising that she saw Michael as a chance to improve things she had been unable to for years. She felt that Michael not only brought her the opportunity to get rich, but also brought her the respect and understanding she had never experienced in her life. They started dating in 2015, and their relationship deepened when they moved in together. Initially, their relationship seemed strong, but over time, it began to decline. Neighbors reported a major conflict happened a few months before Michael passed away. Some witnessed an intense argument, after which Michael and Jennifer allegedly separated. However, they continued living together even though their relationship has deteriorated greatly. Jennifer vanished shortly after the tragedy, and it appeared intentional. At that time, Jennifer was not considered a suspect. The police chose to reach out to Michael's children. They couldn't accept that their father had passed away. As soon as they learned what had happened to their father, they immediately packed their things. Michael's son, Patrick, traveled from Pittsburgh, while his sister and their mother traveled from Maryland. They all met and headed to Michael's home. Patrick told investigators that he never took his father's relationship with stripper Jennifer seriously. He thought Jennifer was too rude, brazen, and greedy, so he didn't want his father to have a long-term relationship with her. Michael's relatives and many friends tried to persuade him to end the relationship for fear she might endanger. In June 2016, Michael's daughter, Katie, got married. She told her father that she did not want Jennifer to attend her upcoming wedding. Michael decided to skip this event, so the wedding happened without the bride's father. Despite his relatives' objections, Michael continued to date Jennifer. Michael even made her the beneficiary of 2 life insurance policies worth about $500,000. By then, everyone knew Jennifer was frequently using illegal substances, exploiting Michael, and possibly having an affair. She severely damaged the relationship between Michael and Patrick, leading to frequent conflicts between them. Many believe that she did this on purpose so that she could gain access to all of Michael's assets, a wealthy man. However, in 2017, new issues emerged when she started distancing herself from him. She would leave without notice, came home late at night and just went to sleep without explaining anything. It was obvious that she was not really interested in the relationship anymore. During this time, she began using more illegal substances resulting in a serious addiction. She was arrested several times. Twice for substance abuse and once for causing an accident. A year before the tragic incident, Jennifer had cut off a cyclist with her car. Despite these issues, Michael stood by her. He helped pay all the fines and legal costs, making monthly payments for 2 cases filed against her, amounting to about $4,000 in total. According to Michael's children, shortly before his death, he mentioned his intention to break up with Jennifer and cancel their wedding plans. For Jennifer, this means she will lose everything, including a life of luxury that he has given her. She had to manage on her own and didn't have much money. She would also lose the large house and access to all the luxuries he had provided. The children of Michael, Patrick and Katie, believe that money was the motive for the murder. Jennifer simply lost control of herself as she found herself facing the possibility of losing everything. Michael had died 24 to 48 hours before his colleagues found him. The cause of his death was a gunshot to the face, fired at very close range. The bullet impacted the facial bone, fragmented, and split into 2 parts. One of them reached the brain, causing instant death. The police had to mobilize all resources and seize every opportunity to capture Jennifer and interrogate her, as she was the prime suspect. She was known to be on probation due to an accident. The police hoped she would come to the department to check in with the inspector, and as they anticipated, she did. On August 10th, 4 days after Michael's death, Jennifer unexpectedly arrived at the police station to pay court costs. She also reported to the police that she had seen on the news that her lover, Michael, had been killed, which surprised her greatly. The dispatcher then informed the detectives leading the investigation about this. It seemed odd because news of the crime had appeared on TV and social media almost immediately after the murder. Why did Jennifer wait 4 days to contact the police? The detectives reached out to Jennifer and arranged to meet her at the station the next day. They didn't reveal that she was a suspect in the murder but said they wanted to ask a few questions about a T-shirt. Meanwhile, they requested a warrant to examine her communications. However, Jennifer sensed something was amiss and didn't show up for the meet. Instead, she disappeared for several days. From experience, the detectives knew that this behavior was typical of criminals who are buying time. During such periods, they often fabricate an alibi or attempt to hide. Meanwhile, the police continued gathering evidence against Jennifer's. To learn more, the investigators spoke to multiple friends of Michael. One friend revealed that shortly before the crime, Michael had called him, expressing fear for life. Michael had discovered the identity of Jennifer's boyfriend, a man known by the alias Ruthless. According to Michael, this man was extremely dangerous. The situation was spiraling out of control, and Michael intended to break off his engagement quickly to protect himself. The man using the alias Ruthless was actually Charles Culo, a notorious figure in criminal circles who had been imprisoned several times. He had committed a string of serious offenses, with most charges related to the distribution of illegal substances. Just days before Michael's death, Charles was released from custody. Jennifer quickly moved in with Charles, but many of her belongings were still at Michael's house. She would occasionally stop by to collect her things, and Michael threatened to give them away to avoid seeing her again. Michael's friend mentioned that he was unhappy about Jennifer's affair. However, Michael chose not to compete with people from the criminal world and decided to end the relationship. The police believed this was a pivotal moment in the investigation. They had a new prime suspect, Charles, who would not have hesitated to shoot a defenseless elderly man. It was suspected that Charles accompanied her to Michael's house. And Charles and Jennifer simply wanted to make a profit, so they killed Michael so they wouldn't be hindered. Meanwhile, Jennifer missed a scheduled check-in with the inspector, which allowed the police to detain her and bring her to justice. On August 25, 2017, police officers went to the motorcycle repair shop where Jennifer worked and arrested her for violating her probation. Later, one of Jennifer's cellmates reported that she behaved very suspiciously during her imprisonment and confessed to intentionally killing Michael. The investigators brought Jennifer's in for questioning and informed her that she was suspected of being involved in the murder. She chose not to answer their questions and instead hired a lawyer. Meanwhile, a warrant was issued to access the communication devices of Jennifer. Jennifer's phone was found at the crime scene at 9:45 p.m. during her correspondence with Michael, confirming she was present at the time of the murder. Afterward, her phone's geolocation showed she traveled about 20 kilometers south to Charles's trailer, arriving there around 11 p.m. Michael's phone remained at the house until about 1 a.m. before moving towards the river, where it stopped working, likely after being thrown into the water. If Jennifer had already left the scene, who took the phone? An electronics expert discovered that Jennifer's phone automatically connected to Michael's Wi-Fi network at about 9:45 p.m. on August 6, 2017, when the murder occurred. This suggests she was very close to the router at that time. The police continued their investigation and discovered that Jennifer had a second mobile phone. They accessed this device, which actually belonged to Michael and was password protected. There was a risk of being unable to unlock it, but thanks to a list of passwords found on Michael's computer, used by Jennifer, they successfully unlocked the phone. This action uncovered significant evidence. The investigation revealed that shortly before his death, Michael was communicating with Jennifer. While she had deleted much of the information, detectives were able to recover it. Michael intended to contact the FBI to ensure Charles was imprisoned for life. Naturally, Charles could not allow this, so investigators believe he chose to kill Michael. Although Charles's phone was examined, he didn't appear to take these threats seriously. Jennifer, however, reacted more aggressively. Michael indicated he was willing to abandon his plan to contact the FBI if Jennifer returned to him and left Charles. The last message Michael sent before his death was "I love you," to which Jennifer did not respond. After accessing Michael's social media accounts, it was discovered that the day after his death, Jennifer began sharing various stories about the incident with her friends and acquaintances. Jennifer recounted many different stories to everyone. She told some that he had been attacked, but she told some other people that she didn't know what happened because they broke up a long time ago. She did this to spread misinformation and cover her tracks. It was obvious that she and Charles were involved in the murder. Eventually, the detective spoke with Charles, and he confessed. According to him, he was not involved in Michael's death. The murder was committed by Jennifer. That day, Jennifer returned to him late in the evening and admitted she had killed Michael. She explained that after an unpleasant conversation, Michael approached her with a gun. She managed to take the gun from him, but it accidentally fired, killing him. Frightened, she left immediately afterward. Jennifer requested to return to Michael to ensure he was either dead or to administer first aid if he was still alive. However, Charles refused to be involved in the crime, so he asked his friend Jerry to take Jennifer to the victim. Jerry, who lived nearby in a trailer with his mother, cooperated with the investigation and confirmed that he drove Jennifer to the river house that evening. He wasn't initially told the reason, but once they arrived, he realized what was happening. It was noted that the crime scene did not resemble a place where a fight had occurred, as Jennifer had claimed, but rather an execution. Michael was sitting in his chair when Jennifer arrived, and she neither checked his pulse nor attempted to help him. Instead, Jennifer collected valuables, removing the watch from his wrist, taking his laptop, and tossing his mobile phone into the river. Jerry then drove her to Charles's trailer. The police discovered traces of she DNA in Michael's pockets, which she had searched. Charles defended himself by explaining that he was not at Michael's house because he had been in an accident shortly before the murder, which left him with serious injuries. At the time, he was using a wheelchair to move around, could barely walk, and was in no condition to commit the crime. Furthermore, he was aware that he needed to avoid any trouble while on probation. Charles was very convincing, and the investigators believed him. They verified his story, confirming that he was indeed recovering from the accident. On September 29, 2017, Jennifer Morrissey was charged with first-degree murder, robbery, and tampering with evidence. The trial was set for January 24, 2019. The prosecutor stated that these charges were linked to several conflicts before the attack. Jennifer felt most upset because Michael did not want to continue funding her lifestyle and left her, which further aggravated her. Additionally, Michael's death was supposed to bring financial gain, as Jennifer claimed an insurance payout of about $500,000. The crucial evidence against Jennifer came from Jerry, a friend of Charles, who testified at the trial. Jerry confirmed that Jennifer returned to the crime scene to eliminate evidence. Due to his cooperation, he was not charged. Likewise, Jennifer's boyfriend Charles was not charged because he also testified against her, even though he initially protected her, delayed contacting the police, and destroyed the murder weapon. Inmates also testified against Jennifer during the trial. The defense argued that Jennifer was not cruel and could not be accused of being vindictive or aggressive. To support this claim, Jennifer chose to testify herself. During the trial, she claimed she went to Michael's house in the evening to collect her belongings. He allegedly met her at the door with a gun, refused her entry, and aimed the gun at her. She said she reacted quickly, a struggle followed, and during the struggle, the gun accidentally went off, shooting he in the face. Jennifer maintained it was an act of self-defense, insisting that if she hadn't shot him, he might have shot her. However, her story didn't align with the fact that Michael was found shot while sitting in a chair, suggesting he wasn't at the door as she claimed. This made her account seem unbelievable. Forensic experts concluded that the most likely scenario was intentional murder. Evidence showed that the gun was about 3 meters from Michael's head when it was fired. Jennifer had aimed precisely between his eyes to kill him swiftly, execution style. There was no evidence of a struggle between them. On February 1, 2019, the jury convened to deliberate a verdict. Jennifer Morrissey was found guilty of first-degree murder, theft, and tampering with evidence. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. However, she never showed remorse. Michael's son was the most affected during the trial investigations. He repeatedly expressed his hatred towards Jennifer because she took his father away from him. Because of Jennifer, the relationship between him and his father has greatly deteriorated, and now they can no longer be reconciled. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Ellen Greenberg. Ellen Greenberg was born in New York on June 23, 1993, as the only child of Joshua and Sandy Greenberg. At the time of the events, she was 27 years old and living in Philadelphia. Ellen grew up in a family filled with love and was a cheerful, outgoing girl. In high school, she played softball and golf, excelling as a competitive athlete. She was well-liked and had many friends. Her mother said that she was a special person, able to connect people with each other. After graduating from college, Ellen earned a degree in communications from the University of Pennsylvania. Even so, she felt this was not her true passion. As a result, she took evening classes at the university and eventually earned a teaching degree. After completing her studies, she quickly found a job as a first-grade teacher in Philadelphia. In 2008, Ellen met Samuel Goldberg, the son of a famous family in the area. They started dating soon after. Deeply in love, they soon decided to live together. By 2011, they were engaged and planning to marry in August. Ellen was thrilled and joyfully prepared for the wedding, trying on her dress and sending out invitations. She had no idea that incident would soon take a strange and unexpected turn. On January 26, 2011, while Ellen was at work, Philadelphia had a major snowstorm, prompting the school to close early. Ellen returned to the apartment she shared with her fiancé, Samuel. At around 5 p.m., Samuel went to the gym, he unaware it would be the last time he saw Ellen alive. When he returned at 5:45 p.m., he found the apartment door locked from the inside. He knocked repeatedly, called Ellen's name, phoned her multiple times, and sent 9 text messages, but received no response. Then, he asked the security guard for help to break down the door, but the guard refused, citing rules against leaving post. Determined, he broke down the door himself. Inside, he discovered a horrific scene. Ellen was sitting on the kitchen floor, leaning against the cabinets, with multiple wounds. He immediately called 911. The operator instructed him to check if Ellen was breathing and to perform cardiopulmonary resuscitation. However, he noticed a knife stuck in her chest, preventing him from starting resuscitation. Tragically, Ellen had already passed away. When the police arrived to inspect the scene, they found that the apartment's entrance had not been forced, and inside, everything appeared to be in order, with no signs of a struggle. The door was locked from the inside, and the latch was secured in the usual way until Samuel broke it down, making it unlikely that an intruder had entered. The police also observed that Ellen's hands had no defensive wounds. Despite her multiple injuries, it seemed improbable that she had inflicted them on herself. Nevertheless, waiting for the forensic examination results, the police concluded that Ellen had ended her life, even though there was no note explaining her actions. Additionally, there were fruits on the kitchen table, indicating that Ellen might have been planning to make a fruit salad when she supposedly decided to end her life. The police took Samuel to the station to provide testimony. By this time, Ellen's parents had received the sad news over the phone. They lived in Harrisburg, a 2-hour drive away. When they learned that their only daughter had passed away, they completely collapsed. The very next day, information about Ellen's death has changed. The autopsy revealed she had 20 wounds, 10 on the front and 10 on the neck from the back. Medical examiners emphasized that these injuries showed that this was a murder. She also had bruises on various parts of her body, both recent and older, making it hard to believe she could inflict neck and head wounds on herself from behind. Especially because at least 2 of these wounds were almost fatal and left her unconscious. Additionally, it takes a great deal of force to cause these injuries, especially head injuries. She was found with a knife stuck in her chest after already sustaining 19 injuries. Could she have done all of this by herself? Despite the evidence that has been found, the police disagreed with autopsy officers' conclusion. Authorities announced that Ellen ended her life. They came to this conclusion because they found no signs of anyone else being there. The door was locked from the inside and the neighbors heard no strange sounds, only Samuel's screams. Additionally, DNA analysis of the knife revealed only Ellen's fingerprints. The bruises on her were explained by the police as injuries from playing sports, even though she had not participated in any sports for several years. Doctors also checked Ellen's mental health and learned from her parents that recently, she has been dealing with anxiety. She had been prescribed 2 medications, both known to have side effects that may cause negative thoughts or behaviors. However, her psychiatrist, Len, stated that she showed no signs of end-her-life thoughts. 2 weeks before the incident, when they met, she seemed fine. In addition, the psychiatrist said had never heard Ellen say that anyone had treated her cruelly. Her family also confirmed this. They described Ellen as a good-natured and cheerful. Her loved ones couldn't believe she would harm herself, as she was happy, preparing for her upcoming wedding, and had even tried on her dress and sent out invitations just days before the incident. Ellen's mother and friends admit that she has been feeling anxious and stressed due to work and wedding preparations. However, they consider this to be normal. The thought that she would harm herself just before her wedding was completely out of character. There was a conflict between the forensic medical examination, which ruled it as murder, and the police, who believed Ellen harmed herself. To resolve this, the doctor decided to send a sample from Ellen's spine to a neurologist at the Forensic Medical Examination Bureau. This was to verify the cause of death. Because if one of her severe neck wounds had penetrated deep enough to reach the spinal cord, causing paralysis, she wouldn't have been able to inflict further wounds. This indicated that someone else was responsible for Ellen's death. 3 months after the incident, the medical examiner retracted his murder hypothesis, suggesting instead that Ellen's neck wounds were not severe enough to cause paralysis and that she could have inflicted them on herself. Ellen's parents were not given a clear explanation for this change in the investigation's direction. They described Ellen as squeamish, noting that she avoided even piercing her ears a second time due to her low pain tolerance, making it hard for them to believe she could harm herself. Despite this, the authorities closed the case. Refusing to accept this decision, Ellen's family decided to pursue their own investigation. They hired top experts, including forensic specialists Kirill Klin and Henry Lee, to consider the evidence and the autopsy report. These experts cast doubt on the police investigation report that Ellen did this to herself. In 2012, Henry noted that the likelihood of murder Ellen is significant. Forensic pathologist Cyril Wecht pointed out that statistically, women rarely use sharp objects to end her life and seldom harm themselves through clothing. On the other hand, Bren, a seasoned detective, investigated Ellen's death. After reviewing the footage, Bren claimed to notice that the bloodstains did not match the position in which Ellen was found, as she was sitting and leaning against the kitchen cabinets. However, there was a trail of blood running horizontally from her nose to her ear, and the blood splatter on her shoes indicated that she was standing when she suffered the injuries. All of this led he to assume that the scene of the incident and the position of the body had been altered. Although Ellen's parents tried, the lawyer failed to change the version of incident, as it would have been necessary to present more compelling evidence. Therefore, the case did not progress and remained unchanged until 2015. Andre, an assistant attorney, did not officially take on the case. However, he was intrigued by the unusual circumstances and decided to review the file to understand what drove Ellen to her actions. Ellen's fiancé, Samuel, found her, and he told the police that the door was locked from the inside, which forced him to kick it open. Andre noted in a photograph from the scene that the lock was a simple hotel-style latch. This type of latch can be locked from both the inside and the outside by turning a screw. An analyst mentioned that this kind of latch typically cannot be broken by a kick without dislodging the door from its frame. Yet, the only damage observed on the door was a missing screw. Additionally, the police considered the fact that Ellen had no defensive wounds. It was unclear in which order her injuries occurred, but the final one was undoubtedly to the heart, where the knife was found. If one of the neck wounds had damaged her bone marrow, she would not have had any opportunity to defend herself. One of Ellen's head wounds, which indicated she was attacked from behind, caught Andre's attention. He raised these concerns with the forensic expert, who said a neurologist had examined Ellen and found no injury. He then asked for an official report to confirm there was no spinal injury, only to be told that no such report existed, it had been lost, suggesting it was more of a rumor that no one had substantiated. At the time, there was no neurologist in the Forensic Medical Examination Bureau, so Dr. Adams was brought in. She allegedly examined Ellen's spine and found no damage. However, it later emerged that no record existed of Dr. Adams being asked to perform this examination. In a 2018 interview, Dr. Adams claims that she did not examine Ellen's spine. Following this, Andre contacted a private investigator for the Greenberg family and recommended hiring a private neurologist. He discovered that Ellen's spine sample was still held at the Forensic Bureau, which seemed unnecessary. The family took this advice and hired Dr. Ross. He concluded in a report that Ellen's spinal cord was damaged by 2 severe wounds on her neck, making it impossible for her to inflict further injuries on herself. At the same time, Andre realized that the data the police had was provided by Samuel, Ellen's fiancé, who was at the scene. This was the only account of what happened in the apartment. Samuel said he had not been with Ellen for 45 minutes, and when he returned, he couldn't open the door. Neighbors said they heard Samuel screaming and calling Ellen's name through the door. Samuel said he became worried and started calling Ellen on the phone, sending her 9 text messages. When he got no response, he went downstairs to ask the building security guard if had any tools to open the door, but the guard refused to help. Later, Samuel claimed he went downstairs several more times, trying to persuade the guard to help him break down the door. In his official statement to the police, he said the guard was with him when he kicked the door open and entered. However, the guard told both the police and Ellen's family that he never left his post and did not accompany Samuel into the apartment. Additionally, the guard noted that Samuel, who claimed to have been at the gym, was wearing boots instead of sneakers. On the other hand, Samuel called 911 at 6:33 p.m., which means that an hour had already passed since he returned to the apartment and attempted to contact Ellen. This is very strange when analyzed. Let's think, he goes to the gym for half an hour. Later, when he returned home, he called Ellen to open the door, but she did not answer him. He shouts her name, tries to call her on the phone and sends her 9 text messages. How long should it take to realize that something is wrong? 10 to 20, maybe 30 minutes, but not an hour. Another strange thing that Andre discovered is that Samuel, before calling 911, made 2 calls, one to his parents and another to his uncle, who is a lawyer. Moreover, they arrived at the scene before the emergency services, and it was Samuel's parents who informed Ellen's parents about what happened. One thing is clear, no one would react in the same way as Samuel. Anyone would ask for help as soon as possible to try to save the life of the person they love, right? Andre listened to Samuel's call to 911, and he was surprised to hear Samuel speak in a calm tone. Even as Samuel said things like my God, his fiancée, there is blood, his voice remained steady. When the emergency services worker asked him to describe the situation, he ignored the request and instead talked about his trip to the gym and his return home. When they instructed him to perform CPR, Samuel asked, "Does he really need to do this?" After spending 2 or 3 minutes supposedly performing CPR, he suddenly told them that he had just found a knife stuck in Ellen's chest. Remarkably, although he was beside her the whole time, but before that he had not seen it. This was no small tool, but a 10-inch long meat cleaver. It was clearly visible. After discovering it, he told them that Ellen must have fallen on the knife. Following this, Samuel was taken to the police station to give a statement. He did so only in the presence of his lawyer and provided a very brief statement. After that, he refused to speak to detectives again, despite their repeated attempts to question him. It seemed there was no way to get him to talk. These things made Ellen's family believe that she was murdered. A neurologist hired by Ellen's family discovered a bone marrow perforation and also found signs of strangulation and bruising. However, many researchers reviewed the footage at the scene and were surprised to see only a small amount of blood. Ellen had 20 injuries, which raised suspicions that the crime scene may have been tampered with. However, the investigation did not conduct any crucial tests. The police did not even examine the trash after arriving at the scene. They simply observed and assumed she had died naturally and without protecting the scene. Additionally, the day after this tragic incident, Samuel's uncle, cousin, and brother visited the apartment, supposedly to retrieve a suit. They took Samuel's laptop, Ellen's laptop, and her cell phone. The police only seized these items on January 29, 3 days later. Upon examination, the laptops showed search queries about ending one's life. Yet, the official report filed in April 2011 did not mention these searches. Ellen's parents and friends slightly changed their views about Samuel after the incident. They never labeled he as a suspect or culprit, but they did have doubts. They realized they had noticed changes in Ellen's behavior weeks before the incident but didn't think much of it at the time. Her friends observed that she started consulting Samuel on every decision, which was unusual for her. Ellen, once a happy girl, had become worried and insecure. One day, she told her parents she wanted to quit her job and move back home. She assuring them it had nothing to do with Samuel and she was fine. Her parents told her she could come home whenever she needed and advised her to seek help for her anxiety. In 2019, Deputy Coroner and Dean of the Faculty of Health Sciences Gregory MacDonald presented a report supporting the police's version of incident. He stated that Ellen had inflicted superficial wounds on herself, as people often start with shallow cuts before going deeper. However, the deep wounds and marks that looked like signs of an attack also made him suspicious. After the incident, Samuel continued to contact the Greenberg family for a year, but their relationship eventually faded. He later sent them an email announcing his wedding. Today, he is married, has 2 children and lives a normal life, completely unrelated to the Greenberg family. The Greenberg family and their attorney have filed a lawsuit against the medical examiner, who performed the autopsy, and the Philadelphia County Coroner's Office to change and explain why the case was closed. In May 2020, a Philadelphia court finally supported their claim. The family hopes to receive the case file, which they were previously denied access to. There is also a CCTV video from the building. It does not show anything unusual, it only confirms the time Samuel left and returned to the apartment. They also asked to see the 911 call recording. These procedures were delayed, and the trial was rescheduled for 2021. If they win, the case will be reclassified and investigated as a murder. However, due to the time that has passed and the investigation's shortcomings, many clues have been lost forever, such as the luminol test. The Pennsylvania Attorney General's office closed the case in July 2022. The case has been transferred to the Chester County District Attorney's Office, which has assigned new investigators and a prosecutor to take over. This change was supported by Ellen's parents. They have always maintained that their daughter did not end her life. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Michaela Costanzo. Michaela Constance was born on May 3, 1994, in the small town of West Endeavor, Elko County, Nevada, USA. She was the youngest daughter of Celia and Theodore. She has 2 sisters named Christina and Delisha. She is famous for her cheerful personality, and she also easily spreading joy to her family and friends. She has a unique perspective on life. She uses her sensitivity to see the good in people and situations. Michaela was very close to her sisters. And they looked so alike that it was sometimes hard to tell them apart. In high school, Michaela became well known and popular. Initially, she stood out for her excellent grades, and later for her impressive performances on the track and field team, which she practiced diligently. Her peers saw her as a star. She also loved writing poetry, with a passion for literature and a dream of becoming a writer. When given the opportunity to demonstrate her storytelling skills, she eagerly took on the job of editing the school newspaper. Christina, her sister, witnessed her success firsthand, as they went to school together every day. Michaela and her mother, Celia, have a strong relationship, largely due to their frequent and open communication. Celia worked the night shift at a local casino, and little girl kept her informed of all her activities through messages. This thing allowed Celia to feel at ease, help her know where Michaela is and who she is with. This time, Michaela was going to meet Cody Patton, an acquaintance from childhood. Although they had grown apart over the years, they were reconnecting. 19 years old, Cody was also in high school and was popular, mainly because he was an outstanding football player on the school's team. His 2-meter height intimidated his peers, and his personality drew mixed reactions. At times, Cody could be extremely nice, but he also had a quick temper and could become easily irritated. Mickey's mother, Celia, recognized this about him. She acknowledged that Cody was an interesting young man who'd be incredibly sweet and charming. However, he was also emotionally unstable, making it difficult for both his classmates and parents to accept him. This may be why he aimed to join the Marine Corps after high school. He hopes it will help him find direction and purpose in life. Toni Fratto, Cody's girlfriend, was a strong supporter of his future plans. At 19, she was a former high school beauty queen and was deeply religious. Toni's parents still approve of Toni and Cody's relationship, even though Cody is not religious. Over time, Cody and Toni grew closer, and she became fully devoted to him. They got engaged and held an official ceremony at church. However, Cody's impulsive and hot-tempered nature remained an issue. After a heated argument with his father, Cody asked Toni if he could stay with her family. Her parents, Casey and Claude, hesitated when Toni suggested this idea, creating family tension. Toni's love for Cody, a young man with problems, was already a concern. Toni's parents feared that refusing Cody's request might lead their daughter to run away with him. So, they agreed to let Cody move in. They hope this will help them take care of their daughter, while also helping Cody succeed in the future. Over time, Toni's relationship with Cody's parents improved, and they acknowledged that Cody was not a stranger to their family. However, Toni remained uneasy. Even though Cody has proven to her that he wants to be with her, but she felt uncertain about their relationship, especially during his interactions with Michaela. Toni kept a diary to express her fears. She fears that Cody will fall in love with Michaela, and that he might leave her for Michaela. This tormented Toni, and her suspicions were not unfounded. Cody was secretly seeing someone else, but it wasn't Michaela, it was an older woman from out of town. Instead of reassuring Toni, he took advantage of her jealousy for his own amusement. He provoking her by interacting with Michaela in the school hallways and sending explicit texts. Toni responded to these provocations by publicly insulting Michaela. Michaela started a relationship with Javier, a young man from school. She wasn't interested in Cody, neither romantically nor as a friend. Therefore, it was unpleasant for her to encounter Toni, who was jealous and often insulted her. The situation worsened as Toni's attacks became more frequent, and arguments between Toni and Cody increased. They discussed their issues in front of classmates. On Thursday, March 3, 2011, Michaela went to school as usual. Christina informed Michaela that she couldn't pick Michaela's up after her running practice because she had a race out of town. Meanwhile, Cody had borrowed a van from a woman he was seeing and exchanged several text messages with Michaela throughout the day. After track practice, around 5 p.m., Michaela decided to walk home since it was only 2 kilometers away. As Michaela was leaving through the back door of the school, she encountered Cody. He attacked her, tied her hands, and forced her into a van. He then picked up Tony. They drove to the outskirts of town, to a vast desert area known as the Gravel Pits, about 8 kilometers west of the Nevada-Utah border. Once there, Cody and Tony pulled the girl out of the van, began beating her, and insulted her with horrible words. After hitting her several times with a shovel, they inflicted knife wounds on her and watched her die. They then removed Michaela's clothes and burned them along with her other belongings. Using the same shovel, Cody dug a shallow grave, placed the body inside, covered it with soil, camouflaged it with vegetation, and then fled the scene with Tony. When Michaela didn't show up and didn't answer calls or texts, her mother, Celia, became worried. As it was getting dark, she decided to leave work early. Celia returns home to find that her 2 older daughters, Christina and Delisha, have been asking around to see if they know where Michaela is. However, no one knows where Michaela is. So, she went to the police to report her youngest daughter, Michaela, missing. The West Wendy police immediately launched an investigation, led by experienced Detective Donald Beckham. When they asked Celia if she had been in contact with Michaela in the past few hours, she replied no. The next morning, the police interviewed Michaela's classmates and friends, including Cody. Cody declared that the last time he saw her was with her boyfriend in front of the school gate. However, this contradicted the accounts of other witnesses. They said they saw Michaela at the back of the building after school. Meanwhile, at home, Celia is extremely scared and uncertainty. Delisha called and texted Michaela several times, hoping for a response. When they discovered Michaela hadn't come home the night before, Christina had dismissed it as teenage rebellion, but now she has changed her mind. Meanwhile, search parties scoured the desert around the city, while the police focused on questioning people close to Michaela, including her boyfriend Javier. He mentioned that Michaela was not someone who would hide things or act strangely. After 2 days of searching, investigators found several unusual things in the desert. They found fresh tire tracks, leading to a spot with fresh blood stains. There was also a suspicious-looking mound of dirt, covered in bushes. Detectives alerted forensic experts, and they quickly arrived at the scene. Upon excavation, they found Michaela's body, showing signs of beatings on her face and neck. A tie was also found in her hand. The police then reviewed the school CCTV footage for more evidence. As soon as Michaela's family was informed that her body had been found, Delisha broke down completely. Delisha felt as if a part of her had been taken away. She couldn't work or focus on anything, because she kept thinking about her younger sister's image, Michaela. Investigators have begun looking into Michaela's phone activity and her social connections. They discovered that at the time Michaela went missing, she had been calling and texting Cody, making him a suspect in the case. Further evidence came from school surveillance footage, which showed she and Cody together in the hallway leading to the exit. A few minutes later, she was gone. On the evening of March 6, Cody arrived at the police station for questioning, accompanied by his father, Keith. During the interrogation, officers showed him video footage from the school's surveillance cameras, but he insisted he was not involved in the incident. Meanwhile, lawyers and investigators gave Cody time to review the case materials and allowed him to speak privately with Keith. Worried, Keith urged his son to tell the detectives everything. Keith begs him to understand the severity of his actions. Now, he must make amends by answering to Michaela's family. He accepted the possible consequences and expressed his readiness to face them. He also told his story of the incidents that took place that day. Cody recounted that after school, he and Michaela went for a walk to the gravel quarry. While there, she asked him to break off his engagement to Tommy and start dating her instead. When he refused, they had a heated argument. He claimed that Michaela hit him in the chest, and in self-defense, he pushed her away. Unfortunately, she hit her head on the car's rear bumper and began to convulse due to the strong impact. Panicking, he tried to knock her out by hitting her head with a shovel, but she stayed conscious. He then cut her throat. Once he realized Michaela was dead, he buried her. When questioned by the police, he said he thought about taking her body to a dump, but couldn't bring himself to do it. When asked about the zip ties on her wrists, he explained they were part of a plan to dispose of the body. After burying her, he sat there crying for several hours before going to find Tony. Despite his detailed account, Cody was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, possibly facing a death sentence. In this situation, Cody's family hired John Hudson, a well-known defense attorney. He specializes in helping murderers not receive the death penalty. Michaela's family didn't just feel the pain of losing their daughter, but were also in disbelief that Cody had so brutally killed his childhood friend. Christina was especially shocked and believed that if he was truly guilty, someone must have forced him to do it. On the other hand, from the start, Celia never believed his confession. She doesn't believe that Michaela considers Cody a friend, let alone ask him to be with Michaela's. Additionally, as a mother, she knew very well that Michaela hated scandals. When Cody was arrested, Tony wrote numerous letters to he, called him, and visited him whenever she could. She said she missed him so much and she would always support him. Meanwhile, the police tried to investigate further, hoping to find useful clues in their conversation. Tony's parents, Claude and Casey, were shocked by the incident and even asked Cody why he committed the crime. Cody simply replied that he didn't know why he did it. The lawyer pointed out that Cody's confession didn't explain all of Michaela's injuries, he suggesting that it was not an accident as Cody claimed. The injuries suggested they weren't caused solely by a shovel, implying that someone acted out of anger. To understand the situation better, the lawyer decided to question Tony. As the interrogation progressed, Tony appeared cold and indifferent. Her emotionless attitude is completely inappropriate, since she is Cody's wife, the man facing the death penalty in this case. In April 2011, just weeks after Michaela's death, Tony's parents left town, leaving her alone at home. That morning, Keith, Cody's father, arrived at her house and took her for a drive. During their conversation, he persuaded her to visit Cody's defense attorney and tell what happened. At the attorney's office, Tony agreed to let lawyer John document her account, which turned out to be completely different from what she had previously stated. Tony claims that after school, she received a text message from Cody, saying that he had kidnapped Michaela. The three of them then headed to the gravel pits. When Michaela and Cody got out of the car, they started arguing, but Tony said she couldn't see what happened. She only heard a noise that alarmed her, and she got out of the car to see what was going on. She saw Michaela lying on the ground and Cody digging what appeared to be a grave. When he stopped, Michaela was already unconscious. Then, they hit her several times with a shovel, and when she showed no signs of life, they took turns stabbing her. Tony also admitted to sitting on Michaela's feet to restrain her during her convulsions. The lawyer John, representing Cody and not Tony, quickly revealed Tony's confession to the police. Consequently, Tony, who was not initially a suspect, was arrested and charged with murder without bail. Forensic experts collected samples from Tony's home, car, and clothing to look for evidence that she was present at the murder scene. In mid-June 2011, the court decided that Tony should also stand trial for murder and kidnapping. The preliminary hearing was set for August 2nd, but in January 2012, Tony accepted a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. She pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. In his testimony, Tony said that Cody was angry with Michael from the beginning. When she entered the van, she noticed that Michaela was very scared. Michaela sat in the back with her hands raised to her face. As they drove into the desert, Cody asked her to help him kill Michaela. Then, Cody asks Tony to watch Michaela while he digs a hole. Once he was done, he forced she to hit Michaela. She refused, so Cody began to beat Michaela. The next, he made she strike Michaela with a shovel. The blow hit Michaela in the shoulder. She then sat on the ground, holding Michaela's legs, and he attempted to slit Michaela's throat with a knife. 3 months later, the district judge sentenced Tony Fratto to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 18 years. The judge described it as the most brutal murder he had witnessed in his 20-year career. The motive for Michaela's murder remained unclear. On Wednesday, May 9, 2012, Cody appeared in court, pleading guilty to first-degree murder, also to avoid the death penalty. On Friday, August 24, in Elko Court, Cody Patton was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. He was imprisoned in Nevada State Prison. Later, in an interview with a well-known television company, Tony shared a more dramatic version of the tragic story. She revealed that Cody had been abusive and controlling of her throughout their time together. She admitted that because of the abuse, she was unable to fight back against him. Looking back, she believed she could have been his next victim. She also accused he of forcing her to participate in Michaela's murder. She said after witnessing him brutally beating Michaela, she feared for her life, leaving her with no choice but to comply. Michaela's mother, Celia, was unable to work for a long time and avoided going to restaurants where she had previously visited with Michaela. She feels sad about her increasingly distant relationship with her other daughter, Delisha. She explains that the tragedy of Michaela's murder changed Delisha so much that Delisha dropped out of school and left the city, estranged from her family. Everything at home reminded her of Michaela, which was overwhelming. The tragedy devastated 3 families: her family, Tony's family, and Cody's family. It will take Michaela's family and friends a long time to get over this loss. Cody will never see his family outside of prison again. Although Tony may be released from prison in the future, her father sadly says that when that happens, he may not be alive. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Molly Tibbetts. Molly Tibbetts was a vibrant young woman born in San Francisco on May 8, 1998, to Rob and Laura Tibbetts. She had 2 brothers, Jake and Scott. Molly was fortunate to grow up with loving parents and began to excel in school shortly after starting 2nd grade. Life presented Molly with an unexpected challenge. Things were going well for her and her parents until they decided to divorce. In 2007, Molly moved to Brooklyn, Iowa, with her mother and brother. Brooklyn was her mother's hometown, and Molly now had the opportunity to experience her teenage years in this quiet town. The move was difficult for Scott, Jake, and Molly, but their caring parents provided essential support. Their father, Rob, maintained a close relationship with his children. Although he couldn't be there all the time, he was determined to do everything he could to help them. Brooklyn is a small town with a population of only 1,400. Life there is calm, a stark contrast to the hustle and bustle of San Francisco. Molly and her 2 brothers have adapted perfectly to their new home. Molly plans to continue her studies at Brooklyn College. She is a sociable person who makes many friends. Molly is smart, energetic, positive, and cheerful. In 2015, Molly met a senior named Dalton Jack at her Brooklyn school, and she instantly liked him. This encounter took place on a chilly October evening while Dalton and his friend were sitting in a pickup truck after playing football. A few younger students approached them, including Molly. Dalton was immediately taken with her. She made him laugh and he found her beautiful. They exchanged phone numbers and soon began having lunch together and going to the movies. From that point on, they fell in love, and Dalton considering her his everything. Molly and Dalton's love for each other deepened over time. 2 years later, when Molly moved from Brooklyn to study psychology at the University of Iowa, she maintained her relationship with Dalton. While she was in Iowa, Dalton stayed in Brooklyn to pursue a career in construction, but this did not affect his feelings for her. They managed to see each other almost every weekend and even on some weekdays. Her freshman year at university passed quickly. By the end of May 2018, she returned to Brooklyn for the summer. During her break at home, Molly kept herself busy throughout the day. She worked at a local children's day camp at Greene Regional Medical Center, and in the evenings, she participated in activities to prepare for her sophomore year. Molly also made time to go jogging almost every evening. She split her time between her mother's house and her boyfriend Dalton's house on the western edge of Brooklyn. Unlike university students, Dalton didn't have a summer vacation and worked most weekdays. His construction work is sometimes local and sometimes he works across the state. On July 18, 2018, Molly visited Dalton's house. Dalton lived there with his brother and their dogs. But both of them worked away from home. Dalton was working on a project on Highway 61 near Oak. Molly agreed to take care of the dogs and stay at Dalton's house to work and study. It was a hot day, so Molly stayed inside with her dogs and her laptop, hoping for a cooler temperature. The day seemed normal. She spent her free time chatting with her boyfriend on the phone, looking for something to eat, or engaging in conversations on Twitter. As the sun set, the weather cooled down. This is a good time for Molly to go for a run. Around 7:30 p.m., she left her laptop open, sent Dalton a selfie, put on her workout clothes, and headed to the cornfield for her workout. However, Molly never returned. She was missing that night. Dalton, who had not heard from her that night, assumed she was just busy and had gone to bed. But the next morning, when Molly's messages remained unanswered, he began to worry. He contacted friends to ask if they had heard from Molly, but they had no idea where she was. All of her social media accounts are inactive. The panic really began when her boss called Dalton to find out why she had missed work. Molly was always on time for her job and had never missed a day before, so her absence was unusual. Dalton was worried and wondered what could have happened to her. Her silence made Dalton, her family, and friends feel uneasy. By the end of the day, the police and the local community were mobilized to search for Molly. Missing posters were quickly plastered around the city and surrounding areas. Shortly after, Molly's father Rob flew from California to join the search efforts. In mid-July, Iowa was experiencing hot summer days, and the surrounding cornfields made visibility difficult. Police announced on television that the search for Molly is ongoing. While there are no new updates, the search continues. Molly, a 20-year-old University of Iowa student, went missing last Wednesday in Brooklyn. She was last seen by her neighbor jogging with her dogs. Wearing shorts, a sports bra and sneakers. At the time, Molly's whereabouts were unknown. The only confirmed sighting was when a neighbor saw her running east of town that evening. Police had no further leads. As the weeks passed, the reward for information about Molly had increased significantly, to nearly $400,000. They even created a website to encourage the public to share any information about Molly. Police also analyzed data from Molly's fitness tracker to determine her running route. Despite all the efforts, the investigation remained unsolved until mid-August. A person in northeast Brooklyn was reviewing surveillance footage when she noticed something unusual. Concerned, she reported her findings to the police, leading to a crucial discovery. The footage showed a 1951 Chevrolet with chrome side mirrors and handles. Initially, nothing unusual appeared, but the car returned and appeared on surveillance cameras multiple times. Then, at 8:07 p.m., the same Chevrolet was recorded again. This time speeding away. Based on the footage, the car, which was behaving erratically at the same time and place that Molly went missing, caught the attention of the police. They began searching for the car in the small town. They quickly located it. A day after reviewing the video of the black Chevrolet, deputy sheriffs spotted the vehicle on the road. Instead of stopping immediately, he followed the car until the driver stopped. The deputy sheriff approached the driver's window and identified him as John Bath. When asked about Molly's disappearance, John claimed he had no knowledge of her and was not involved. He was allowed to leave, but his freedom was short-lived. Just 2 days later, police officers visited John's workplace at a dairy farm and noticed he was now driving a different car, which belonged to his girlfriend. At this point, the police began to take notice of John, but they had no evidence that he was involved in Molly's disappearance. The police took John to the local police station for further questioning. Although John was not required to answer their questions, he chose to cooperate. The interrogation lasted several hours, and ultimately, John confessed. However, his real name was Christian Bahena Rivera, and he lived and worked in rural Polk County near Brooklyn. Originally from Mexico, he had entered the United States illegally at the age of 17. Because he could not work legally, he was not registered in any official system, including at his job on a farm near Brooklyn. During questioning, police asked Christian if he knew where Molly was, and he admitted that he had seen her the night she disappeared. He explained that he had noticed her before deciding to approach her. When he ran over to strike up a conversation, Molly did not respond. When he persisted, she took out her phone and warned him to leave or she would call the police. The next day, August 21st, after more than 10 hours of questioning, Christian agreed to lead the police to a remote area outside of Brooklyn. When the police arrived and got out of their car, they found Molly's body. She was lying under some corn stalks, wearing only a sports bra and socks. Christian confessed that when he confronted Molly and she threatened to call the police, he acted out of anger and ended up killing her, then hiding her body in a cornfield. Molly suffered between 7 and 12 stab wounds to the chest, ribs, neck, and skull, ultimately leading to her death. This tragic news has left Molly's family, friends, and acquaintances heartbroken. As they learned more about the circumstances of Molly's death, their grief turned to anger. On August 22nd, Christian was charged with first-degree murder. Concerns that he might flee led to his bail being raised from $1 million to $5 million. As the investigation into Molly's disappearance turns into a murder case, developments related to her case continue to surface both in public and in the media. The following month, Christian denied any involvement in the case, despite initially confessing to Molly's murder. He later recanted his confession. Police made significant progress in the case. They searched Christian's black Chevrolet and discovered blood in both the trunk and on the rims. Testing revealed that the blood belonged to Molly, indicating that she had been in Christian's trunk that night. A series of bureaucratic delays postponed the court case. The public trial of Christian was delayed for several months and moved to another county for safety reasons. In August 2019, Christian's defense team submitted a 20-page motion arguing that his confession should not be used as evidence. They claimed he was not properly informed of his Miranda rights because of his foreign nationality. This means that although he admitted to killing Molly, he did not receive a warning that anything he said could be used against him in court. Therefore, his confession could not be used as evidence. In addition, the judge postponed Christian's trial until 2020 to allow more time to review the case. In 2020, the trial was postponed again. On May 17, 2021, Christian Bahena Rivera's trial finally began. His defense team argued that the police had violated his rights before charging him with murder. They claimed that the police had used illegal interrogation methods to force Christian to confess. When this approach failed, the defense attempted to blame Molly's boyfriend, Dalton, claiming that he had cheated on her 3 years earlier and then killed her. However, Dalton had a solid alibi for the time of Molly's disappearance. Although he was absent from work for nearly 2 hours, several co-workers were able to confirm his whereabouts during that time, and it was clear that he loved Molly very much. Christian eventually testified, but he changed his story. He claimed that 2 armed men came to his house, forced him to drive them until they found Molly, then killed her and forced him to drive to a cornfield, threatening his son's life if he revealed what had happened. Christian's confession, the surveillance footage, Molly's blood found in the trunk of his car, and his own incredible story all pointed clearly to his guilt. On Friday, May 28, Christian Bahena Rivera was convicted of murdering Molly Tibbetts. After just 7 hours of jury deliberation, Christian was found guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison. After the verdict, Christian's girlfriend, who had been raising their son Will, disappeared from Brooklyn, leaving his son on the farm without a family. With nowhere else to go, Will was eventually adopted by Molly's mother, Laura. This adoption allowed Will to continue his education and move toward a brighter future. Her parents consistently chose love over hate, which helps explain Molly's positive character. The support didn't end there. Hundreds of people came together at the University of Iowa to celebrate Molly's memory.